What if Bella became Damon's friend? Part 1. At least we got each other. You always knew how to make an entrance. My voice came out strained in a rough groan as I continued to look up in wonder at her as she stayed in her place but had now lifted herself up to straddle me. It's part of my charm, she giggled shyly, a soft blush coloring her cheeks in the most tantalizing way, making her seem more innocent way that you wouldn't expect. That was what was so intriguing about Isabel. She was so shy and kept to herself, but when you got to know her, the innocent lamb facade was replaced with her fierce lioness that took no shit from anyone. Next time, do you think you could try and not kill me? I raised an eyebrow at her in question, but really, I was amused by her antics. I'll be sure to keep that in mind, but you have to admit it was funny. Yeah, to people with a morbid sense of humor, I smirked, and she returned it with her own, flashing me her teeth, giving me a view of her sharp incisors with a challenging expression. I missed you, I confessed. The house didn't seem so big anymore with my best friend ex-lover here. Which is why you better make the most of my time here. She began to pull herself off me and then reached her hands out for me to take. Within a flash, she had me upright too. What are you doing here? Crossing my arms over my chest as I waited for her answer. She probably wanted something, a favor or something, or a place to stay. Maybe she was running. Don't judge me from my assumptions. I mean, I haven't seen the girl for over 90 years apart from the random messages and letters. I knew Isabel, and the clouded pain in her eyes told me there was something wrong. It's not every day your friend turns 172 years old, she answered, trailing hands up my bare chest, and then smirked at my shiver, before starting her way up the stairs, knowing I'd follow her. You didn't exactly choose the right timing, and anyway my birthday is tomorrow, I grumbled, trailing after her. She turned around and faked a gasp. Damon Salvatore declining a chance to party, but then added something that flared up my anger and guilt again. Is this because of Elena? She questioned. It was her turn to cross her arms of her chest, pushing up her breasts in the blue tank top. That was when I noticed what she was wearing. On top of the blue tank top, she'd worn a leather jacket paired with her skin-tight leather trousers that looked as if it was painted on. She'd also worn knee-high boots with laces. You know me, I don't tie down to anyone. My reply was casual, but my voice betrayed my indifference as the words poured out in a fierce growl. Oper Lise, stroking her cheek while she's sleeping, putting dreams in her head to get her all hot and bothered. She reminded me of my actions. When she said it, she reminded me of how much I changed. How do you know? Narrowing my eyes in wonder if she'd been spying on me. It's the witchy juju, she answered in explanation, cocking her head at me. Her amusement was then erased from her eyes as she stepped close to me. Her body pressed up against mine so I could even feel as her warmth now heated my chest. Looking deep in my eyes, she told me what I already knew. This can't happen again, Damon. Not to her. She's different. She's not Catherine, Issa reminded me with a soft voice. Don't you think I know that? I snapped and regretted it, hoping I hadn't offended her, but that wasn't likely. Not with Issa. I know you know that, but sometimes you need reminding. She patted my cheek. I know, sighing in frustration as I rubbed my forehead. Issa knew me too well, and it pissed me off sometimes, but then again it was kinda nice that I had someone who understood. I felt her body move away from mine, so I looked up to hear what she had to say. A smile had returned to her face, reflecting her happiness. Okay, enough with the heavy ILL lecture you later when it's not your birthday. Oh joy, I groaned, but still smiled at her, not continuing with the subject. So what do you want to do? Carly, Italy, she began suggesting as we walked up the steps again. When we reached the landing, she whirled round to face me. New York. AC/DC. The Who. She then jumped on my bed, her arms up in the rock star sign as she shouted for one night only. That was some night, recalling her last birthday when we'd gotten drunk and partied in New York. Some crazy night. She began to jump on the bed, doing splits in the air before she landed and bounced again. Woo, she laughed, continuing with jumps. You are crazy, I laughed. Another part of my charm, she replied, then jumped in the air one more time before landing on her knees on the bed. Her hair was now falling down her shoulders in a wild manner, her lips parted as she breathed heavily, and her chest rising and falling again as she caught her breath. Her body was flushed from excitement and her whole appearance just glowed with an after-sex glow. Damon, my brother called, a stern tone underlying his voice. Opening the door, I shouted up here. Issa squealed in delight knowing Stefan was here. Did you bring another girl? He asked with anger as he took in my appearance. Elena came up the stairs after him, a glare on her face as she too saw how I was. Her eyes continued to hold the hatred over my mistake. In my defense, he didn't even die. I realized then how it must look, me without a shirt, the sounds of the bed creaking. Part of me wanted to explain myself, especially to Elena, but the other part was rejoicing in seeing her jealous. I know how this must I began to explain, but Elena cut me off. You really shouldn't bring your lady friends. Her nose scrunched up in disgust as she stared me down. It was quite amusing with her choice of words. To Stefan's house she finished, and again my anger returned. Stefan's house. Stefan. It was always Stefan. Correction, Salvatore boarding house. I thanked the heavens for the angel that was Isabel Marie Swan. Not Stefan's house, she added with a glare, leaning on the doorframe with her arms over her chest. My eyes widened when seeing that she removed her clothes and placed herself in my dark blue button-down shirt with black shorts underneath. Her bare legs were teasing me as I saw her creamy skin revealed to me. Her hair was still wild, which confirmed whatever assumptions Stefan and Elena were making. Glancing at the happy couple, I saw Elena was angry at her and both girls continued to glare at each other. Elena seemed to be displaying some sort of jealousy, and that made me realize why she was putting on the show. Isabel. Stefan breathed in a shocked gasp. Hey Stephanie, she grinned, breaking the connection with Elena and walking up to Stefan to give him a hug, which he returned. Elena's anger was even more evident with Issa's hug. My shirt rid up as she reached up and I got a glimpse of her ass, and me cocked my head to the side in appreciation. Elena's eyes raided to me with another disgusted glare. Issa then moved back to her place next to me and I put an arm around her, smiling as she rested her cheek on my chest. Nice to see you again, Steph, she spoke again. You too, where have you been hiding? He asked with a smile. Here and there, she waved her arm with a mischievous glint in her eye. I'd stayed in Forks for a while. What on earth were you doing in Washington? I asked her and watched as the pain and hurt became clearer with the question. Let's talk about that later, she murmured, and then pushed past me to go back inside my room. Obviously something or someone had happened causing her this pain, and when I found out what it was, all hell would break loose. My jaw clenched remembering how Issa had helped me with Catherine problem, and I was grateful. I'll see you lovebirds tomorrow. My voice was bitter. Elena had moved in closer to Stefan, so I walked away from them and into my room to go talk to Issa, knowing that Elena wanted to ask the questions about our new visitor. Elena seems nicer in my visions. Issa's voice came from behind me as I closed the door. I knew what she was trying to do and it wouldn't work. Turning around, I found her sitting cross-legged on the bed, still in my shirt. Her hair was piled up in a messy bun and she was wearing red-rimmed glasses as she read through an old book. Even this was a sexy look for her. You can totally do the whole sexy librarian fantasy, not able to stop my thoughts from being voiced with a smirk. She looked up and returned the smirk and then cheekily took off the glasses and then pulled out the pin in her hair, causing it all to fall. She then shook it in a very alluring way. My tongue jutted out to lick my lips. You've been a bad boy, Damon, she breathed. The peak of her breasts were showing because she unbuttoned 3 of the buttons of the shirt as she kneeled on the bed. A very, very bad boy. Her voice was lower and even more tempting. I felt the need to return, so I jumped to the bed and attacked her. I rolled us over so she was under me, and without thinking I let my senses overwhelm me as I ravaged her pink pouted lips. I was surprised and thankful when she responded. Her fingers reached for my hair, tugging and pulling at my strands as her lips moved with mine, and then she caused me to groan by licking my bottom lip and then biting it lightly. She then granted me access by parting her lips so my tongue could delve into the smooth caves of her mouth. Her tongue was wild as it lashed and we both fought for dominance. My hips rocked against hers as we continued the battle. My fingers reached for the buttons of the shirt and began to unbutton the buttons, but she then stopped me by rolling over away from me. She sat at the other edge of the bed, her back to me as she rested her head in her hands, her hair falling down her face as she breathed deeply to calm herself. What are we doing? She sighed to loom at me. Evidence of my attack was in her even wilder unruly hair, her swollen lip, her flushed face and her creased shirt. It was pretty great, smirking to ease the tension. You're just using me to make yourself feel better about Elena's rejection, she snapped, and I froze in shock by her words. I am sorry Damon, she sighed, and I caught on to the sound of her voice cracking at the end. With a defeated sigh, I moved behind her and pulled her down to lay on the bed next to me. What happened in Forks? Keeping my voice soft as she sniffled. Gently, I stroked her hair as she lay in my arms. Her back was to me so I couldn't see her face, but I knew that it would be easier for her to tell me when she couldn't see my face. She sighed deeply before turning to face me and then stroked my cheek. Cliché story. Fell in love and he broke my heart, she began. He was a vampire. A cold one, she added, and I laughed. You dated a sparkly, I chuckled, and that made her laugh with me. He told me he loved me and I believed him. Her eyes no longer hid the pain. It was clear as they reddened with threatening tears. If he sparkled, he was gay. I tried to make her laugh again and remove the excruciating, but she just gave a half-hearted chuckle and then bowed her head down to my chest, so I pulled her closer. I am sorry about what I said, she apologized in a low murmur. We quite the pair, huh? She muttered, sounding sleepier. Yeah, but at least we got each other. When waking up, I found my bed empty. Isabel was nowhere in sight and I feared maybe it had just been a dream, but then I heard her voice from downstairs as she sang TNT by AC/DC. With a grin, I grabbed a t-shirt and ran downstairs in vampire speed. Morning sunshine, she smirked. She was still in my shirt, but I noticed that she detained her hair slightly. At the moment she was flipping a pancake with clear precision and then catching it again in the pan. Oh, did you see that? Did you see that? She said in her best man voice, making me laugh at her ridiculousness. Morning princessa, I smiled. Smells good. I reached for a pancake, but she slapped my fingers away. Ow, what was that for? Pretending to be hurt as I rubbed my fingers with a mock scowl. Wait until you brother and Elena arrive, she replied, then returned to her cooking. Anyway, what do you want to do today? You wishes my command, she asked, adding another pancake on top of the pile. Let us not make such a big deal out of this. Of course we making a big deal out of this. Issa threw her hands in the air in exaggeration. I am going to remind you about fun. Remember fun? She teased me and I swatted her ass as she walked by to set the dining table. Before I could make a smart remark, Elena and Stefan walked through the door laughing but froze when they caught sight of us. Elena's happiness faded as her eyes caught Bella's form, but Stefan just smiled, not noticing the hostility his girl was showing. Morning, Issa skipped to my side, obviously giddy with excitement to what the day would bring. Hey, Stefan was first to speak and both him and Elena walked towards us. I made breakfast, she told them, still smiling sweetly, but everyone remained silent. I kept my gaze on Elena, but she kept hers on Issa's. Her arm was wrapped around Stefan as if marking her territory. If only she knew how Stefan was not Issa's type. Inwardly I chuckled at Elena's change of demeanor. Shall we? She didn't wait for an answer but instead skipped into the dining room. Stefan rubbed Elena's arm as if assuring her, and then she nodded before glancing at me, then dropping her head down as if in shame. Another smile was brought to my lips as I followed close behind the two young lovers. Issa had created a whole feast, completed with 6 stacks of pancakes. Orange juice on the side, muffins were on a different plate along with a fruit salad. She put out golden syrup and whipped cream too. She walked in with a pot of coffee and set it down on the table, her smile never leaving her face. Stefan and Elena took a seat opposite hers, so I sat next to Issa, to which she grinned. Bon appetit, she encouraged us, so we began to fill our plates. Elena seemed hesitant, but even she couldn't resist the delicious smells of the breakfast. This is really good, Stefan complimented her, making Issa pause to smile before eating a strawberry. I watched as she placed the fork that held the piece of strawberry on her pink tongue, and then watched as her lips wrapped around the fork, then pulled out with a soft pop sound that only vampires could hear. I felt constricted in my jeans at the moment, so I had to adjust myself on the seat, but Issa wouldn't let me calm down because she elicited an even stronger hunger with her delectable moan. She slowly turned to me and peeked at me under her long lashes. You have got to stop breaking things. She warned me. At first I was confused, but then she nodded to my tight grip around the glass full of orange juice. It only means I have to clean up after you. Her fingers grazed my arm in a soft, gentle manner to soothe me. She then broke my gaze and looked back at Stefan and Elena, who had been watching us with interest. I returned to my eating with a small smirk, knowing that Elena was pissed off at Issa. Well, first things first, I should probably introduce myself to you. Issa broke the uncomfortable silence by directing her attention to Elena. Isabel Marie Swan, in your presence. Well, I am. Elena began to introduce herself but was cut off by Issa. A descendant of Catherine. Issa slipped up and then slapped her forehead when seeing Elena's face fall with sadness. I am sorry, Elena. I didn't mean to. It's just the resemblance is so uncanny, and when I see you, I see her, and all I can think of it beating her ass again. She rambled her apologies. Her last comment made me chuckle. It's okay. Elena smiled a little too. Again, she caught on to the ending of Issa's rambling. We crossed paths in the 50s. Different haircut, different style, but same bitchy attitude. We laughed at that comment, including Elena, which surprised me, but then again Issa was hard to not love. She started spouting different sorts of shit, so me being me didn't turn the other cheek but instead handed her ass back to her after staking her. So you re a vampire? Elena whispered the last word and Issa laughed, then leaned into Elena across the table. Elena, we re not in public, so you don't have to whisper, Issa whispered. I smirked at Elena's soft chuckle as she realized her mistake. It's probably because she's used to calling out creatures of the night in public. I am surprised Stefan didn't tell you. I thought you guys told each other everything. She zero emphasized the word everything. Oh, we do, but in this case, it wasn't my secret to tell, Stefan replied. Well, Elena, technically I am a vamp. Issa began her story after throwing a grape in the air and then catching it in her mouth. She then turned to me for a high five, which I gave. What do you mean technically? Elena's intuitive was revealed again as she dropped her fork and leaned in to listen to Issa's explanation. I guess it's fair you know about me, she sighed, then crossed her legs, maintaining the balance on the chair. The Swan bloodlines hold a lineage of witches. You re a witch? Elena gasped with the sudden revelation. Part witch, and please don't interrupt me, it spoils the tension I am trying to create, Issa joked, then continued with her vague description of her life story. I was born with the witch but was upgraded to a vamp, she explained, her finger going around the rim of her cup as she spoke. It's not supposed to be like this because the whole thing violates with nature's way, but there's a reason I was kept alive, and I think I am beginning to realize why. Her eyes trained on Elena as if finding some discovery. What's the reason? Elena perked up. Even I was curious as to what she thought was the reason of her fate. She hadn't been able to figure it out, so why now? You'll find out soon enough. She took a drink from her coffee. It was so like Isabella, always so cryptic. I'd be a hypocrite to actually start judging her. Moving on, I've got plans first, she causally added, and my face fell from the words. What do you mean you've got plans? Eyeing her with suspicion. How long had she actually been awake? Plans, Oxford Dictionary, detailed proposal for doing or achieving something, Issa played, then smirked with her clever remark. Smart ass, mumbling in a low voice knowing she'd hear me. And don't you forget it, I stared after her as she skipped down to the kitchen with some dirty plates. Elena got up and followed her with some plates, always the hospitable guest. I was kinda disappointed with no sounds of any catfights, but then again our lives were full of enough drama so a little piece wouldn't hurt. All I could hear was the sound of them loading the dishwasher. Turning to Stefan, I saw his well-known calculating expression, his brows furrowing as he contemplated over something. I can actually see the steam coming out of your ears, I joked, smirking at his expression. He kinda looked constipated, but honestly, I was curious to what he was thinking about. It's your birthday, Stefan gasped in realization. It's your birthday. Bit slow on the uptake, brother dearest, but yes, and can we just not make a big deal about this? Scolding Stefan's outburst. We had much more pressing matters to deal with and everyone was getting hot-headed about my birthday. Was I the only one with my head screwed on? But we will. Issa came through the doorway, her hand on her hip, scowling down at me, but I just gave her my warning glare, which she waved off. I can believe you didn't tell us it's your birthday. Elena came in after, so I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't deny that I did feel somewhat happy that she cared. Let's just pause for a second, holding my palms up. We've got a new crazed vampire with no ring and no bloodlust control. We've got a mysterious Lockwood and on top a raging crazed vampire bitch, but no, let's celebrate something that has happened more than 100 years after my rambling. I pushed myself from the table and walked towards the staircase, but Issa flashed in front of me, a frown on her face. Damon, you re on a lot of people's hit list. this may well be your last birthday, Issa teased me. Stefan and Elena laughed at the fact. Just listen to my plan, she whined, so I halted in my step. Thank you. Now I know you guys had plans, but Isabel's office doesn't really say parte. She rolled her eyes at me, her head lopping to the side. We will be having a birthday party here at 8:00. Her eyes glowed with excitement at the idea. Thanks for telling us, Stefan laughed sarcastically. You're welcome. Now, me and Elena are going to go out giving invitations. She threw a glance over her shoulder to look at Elena, who stepped towards us with her arms crossed. What about finding information about Catherine? She asked. I know some info, Issa announced, and I looked at her, questioning her words. You'd think she would have told me by now, but she probably did this on purpose so she had something against me for later use, as in now. Well, go on then, urging for her to reveal what she knew, because at this point anything would be helpful. If I tell you, do you promise to turn up at the party? She gave me an ultimatum, so I decided to choose my wording carefully and not play into her hands. If your information is good enough, I'll consider. Satisfaction set into my smile when seeing her slump her shoulders in defeat. Damon, she sighed, stepping closer to me. Her eyes were silver now, wide and innocent as she breathed out the words that crumbled away my willpower. Trust me. With a groan, I pinched the bridge of my nose, looking down at the carpet, and then stared back at her. Fine, I'll go to the party, relenting to her conditions. Stefan and Elena were surprised at my defeat, probably because it was something new to them, but with Issa it was different. I trusted her as she trusted me. She always called me out on my bullshit, and no matter how many times I screwed up, she'd still stay with me. Okay. Damon, shower. Elena, you need to tell Alaric there's a change of plans then. Stefan, you can go sort out Blondie. Ooh, hold that thought. Issa then zoomed up the steps, disappearing from our sight. I could hear her rifling through drawers, and I wondered if I should be worried that she had already unpacked her stuff here. I didn't really care. In fact, I was happy. It meant she would be staying a while. Found it, she shouted, and then flashed back down the steps to land in front of Stefan. For Blondie, she passed Stefan something, so I angled my head to catch a better view, only to find that she was giving Stefan a necklace. Not just any necklace, but one with a lapis lazuli stone. Thank you, Elena smiled softly. It seemed she was warming up to her now. No prob. Warn her that if she kills anyone, I'll be taking off the charm while she's walking in broad daylight. Her voice was dark as she gave the message. Fear crept up in Elena's eyes, and it was probably the new turn in Issa's gentle nature. Guess I better go now, Stefan announced. Don't worry. I'll take good care of her. The hidden meaning was intentionally clear, which earned me a glare from Elena, who grabbed Stefan and gave him a heated kiss. I turned away, clenching my jaw as it became more heated. Issa caught me eye and mouthed an apology, so I shrugged. I'll see you later, Stefan added, flashing me a smug grin, then turned to Issa. Guess I'll be seeing you at the party. He gave his goodbye to her with a sarcastic smirk. Yes, you will. She was smiling smugly that she'd gotten her way. With one quicker peck from Elena, Stefan walked out the door, the necklace in his pocket. Damon, shower, Issa reminded me with a stern tone, so I grumbled and walked up the steps grudgingly, following my given orders just to name her happy. BPOV. I don't know how you can do that. Elena commented on Damon's hidden listening skills once he was gone. Damon is a softie, really. Then I turned to look at Elena in the eye if given the chance. His humanity may not show, but it's definitely still there. Was he being a softie when he snapped Jeremy's neck? She snapped back in challenge, fire in her eyes as she raged with anger. You could see her passionate nature with the way her anger came across. Everyone saw her as weak and fragile, but when she was mad, it was a different story. Ouch. I am guessing he's not in your good books right now. You think? She continued to test my impatience with her attitude, but I guess could praise her braveness. It's probably 'cause she knows the Salvatores would kill me if I hurt her. Put yourself in his shoes. He spent his whole eternity searching for Catherine, the person he believed to be his true love, and then she turns up only to turn him down for Stefan. Then he comes to you and he's began to trust you, but you reject him too, coincidentally using the same reason Catherine used. Elena's jaw clenched, her body tightened with my words, and I could see the salty tears brimming in her blue eyes. That night he came to you, he let his switch off, revealing his humanity, only to have you reject him explaining the vision I'd caught and from my perspective. You know him so well. It helps to know someone for over 60 years give or take revealing the information to her. Wow, how did you meet? We met when he was at war. I was a nurse and he came in one day. The memory of our first encounter filled my mind as I told the story. A new gurney was rushed in, holding a limp body. I rushed over to direct the others as to where to take the body but paused when looking down to the most piercing blue eyes, full of pain and distraught and untold secrets. He was a young man, probably in his late teens or early 20s, with raven black hair and chiseled jaw which now clenched as he tried to stop the screams threatening to escape. His taut muscles were showing with his torn rugged battle clothing. Something about him made me feel the need to help him. His innocent eyes were screaming at me for help. He had a bleeding wound on his head to which I put my immediate attention, but then I caught sight of the other bleeding wound on his leg, probably from a gunshot. Head first. That was the main priority. Hello. What's your name? I began to speak to him, wanting to hear his voice but also in order to keep him conscious. Damon Salvatore Mom, he answered in a strained voice. And you are? Nurse Swan. You forename. He urged, making me blush with his interest. Isabel Swan, I told him. My fingers gently cupped the back of his head as I wrapped the bandage, not wanting him to hurt any more than he did. You pretty. Damon's words tumbled out in a slur, his eyes were drooping. His comment on my appearance caused me to drop my gaze away from his penetrating eyes. Thank you. I think you quite the handsome fellow yourself, I complimented him, trying to keep him talking. Well, thank you, Miss Swan. You like an angel, he added. The heat rose to my cheeks with his charming demeanor. You can rest your head now, I comforted him and let him lay back onto the pillows. Try and sleep, Damon. Okay. He shook his head and I smiled warmly at him, then began to gauze his bleeding leg. I want to keep talking to you, he stopped me with his arm when I tried to get up. Okay. Tell me about yourself. What do you want to know? Tell me about your hometown. I was born in France. That's amazing, he mumbled, obviously close to slumber, so I continued to talk as a comfort. Yes, it is. I like it in the night when it's peaceful and the stars come out. I like that tea. He stopped in his words and I saw that he'd fallen asleep. His breathing became heavy and I sat watching as his chest rose and fell rapidly. I could hear his heart beating, which sounded as ragged as his breathing. I reached out to wipe the strands of hair away from his forehead but simply felt the sheathed sweat on his forehead. One thing was clear, he wouldn't even make it through the night. Looking around, I found no one was paying attention to us and most of them had gone to sleep. Nurses had probably gone to drink their coffee and relax until another patient came in. All I could hear was the lazy sounds of the soft snoring or the occasional shuffling of blankets as they rolled around their small beds. Looking back at Damon, I acted on impulse and bit into my arm, then led it towards his lips. Instinctively he began to suck on my arm and I tried to relinquish the thought of how his lips wrapped around my skin and how his hot breath tickled my skin, but instead kept in my mind that I was doing the right thing. You saved his life? Elena asked, wonder lacing her surprised tone. He looked so scared when they brought him in. I think he knew that it was his last few hours, remembering how piercing his eyes had been and the fear that seemed to surround him. Not that I could blame him after witnessing death after death in battle and not knowing if you'd be next. Did you tell him the next day when he woke to a full recovery? She voiced her thought and I shook my head in reply. Not the next day, but when we crossed paths again 20 years later and I hadn't aged, he pinned me on the wall and told me he remembered. Just think, if you hadn't been there, Damon would have died that day. Elena said. Her head was now in the clouds, processing the information I'd unveiled to her. DPOV. Elena's words hit me because I'd never thought of it like that. Isa had saved me. It was because of her I was even here today, and with that thought, I would forever be grateful for Isabelle Marie Swan's life. After Elena left to move see Alaric, I went and took a bath in Stefan's shower, seeing as Damon became occupying his. As soon as I was accomplished, I wrapped myself in towel and were given a quip to come out, but gasped whilst locating Damon was there with his signature cocky smirk. Properly, it become a step up from his usual extensive brooding. Well, good day, he teased, his eyes traveling up and down my moist shape that changed into barely included by means of the cream blanket. Do not you appearance scrumptious, he drawled out with an appreciative tone. I again the favor by using licking my lips at the sight of him in dark denims and a black pinnacle that hugged his muscle tissue. Despite the fact that he become nevertheless barefoot and his hair was dripping, he nevertheless seemed undeniably sexy. My beyond emotions for him had back ever on the grounds that I tackled him to the ground and felt his bare chest pressed up in opposition to mine. I would made and try to pass on because of his love for Catherine and tried the so referred to as pals which regarded to be all we would ever be seeing as new Lady Elena changed into in the image. I would tried so tough to neglect approximately him and I might even attempted falling for a person else and once I subsequently did, he broke my coronary heart. It become actual that I would fallen for Edward, his type nature and protectiveness, how passionate he changed into in tune, his love for his own family, how he do anything for me, even risking his life to save James. I was going to inform him the truth but he said all those matters approximately how I wasn't appropriate sufficient and it jogged my memory of ways I was Catherine sufficient for Damon. His words had reduced me deep and I could not fathom the hatred I had for him however I knew he nonetheless had an area in my coronary heart however I couldn't deny the pull I might forever have towards Damon. What is wrong? Damon pulled me out of my mind and I blinked returned the tears that had threatened to spill. Oh nothing. I simply known as you scrumptious, do not get all emotional he teased so I slapped his arm with a mock glare but he just smirked, one side of his lips curving upwards and one eyebrow hitched as his head decreased to my gaze. UK. His voice sounded his fear as his arms laid on my shoulders to look intently at me. I am best. Simply remembering I murmured one to the fact. He sighed and then took my arms in his. That jerk didn't deserve you. He should been silly to let a hot gal like you slip away and if I ever meet him, I'll strangle him with my naked fingers. Oh darling, you sure do say the sweetest things patting his cheek in a patronizing manner, my sarcastic tone made him roll his eyes. I supposed it he argued in a stern voice that held no signal of enjoyment. One day you'll make a certain lady very satisfied I told him and he smiled, his tender smile that he only showed to me. I am gonna move change then flashed away from him no longer wanting to break down in the front of him. Slamming the door at the back of me, I slid down the door and breathed deeply to calm myself. As soon as I was calm, I stood up ready to ding my clothes. Quick I rifled via the duffel bag that I might saved inside the corner of Damon's room. Interior, I found my denim shorts and a crimson Henley, topping it with a denim waistcoat, pairing it with gladiator footwear. Jewelry handiest being the lapis lazuli heart necklace and the appeal bracelet I might gotten from Charlie earlier than leaving. My hands grazed the silver bee he depositioned in it. Charlie's love had felt real, no longer compelled in any manner and for him to buy me this sign of sentiment made me consider him as my father. My easy outfit became due to the fact I'd simply spend the day planning the birthday celebration and I'd be converting later besides, even my hair turned into just tied up in a simple messy bun. Good day you performed in there. Damon's voice called from the other side of the door. Nope answering with his tongue's cheeriness that I may want to grasp, not wanting to fear him further. It changed into obvious he knew something was incorrect. You can go now I added while hearing the smooth shuffling of his toes at the difficult wood ground nevertheless nearby. Positive, kick me out of my room he muttered, putting emphasis on the word my however I ought to then listen his retreating steps descend their stairs v. I rolled my eyes at his infantile muttering after which gave myself as soon as over, including a gentle dab of my purple lipstick, I decided I used to be carried out for now so I left the room to head downstairs however paused for a second to find that Damon wasn't on my own. ELPOV. After speaking to Alaric and Bonnie, I would gone return to the house however stopped in my tracks to find Damon leaning towards the wall, glaringly having heard my whole communication. He leaned up from the wall and stalked toward me, his brooding expression in location. What do you need Damon? A birthday kiss might be best. I am certain it might be, would not imply you are getting one. Come on Elena, you recognize you need me he turned into status proper in front of me. I tried to ignore how the little strands at the front of his head flopped forwards lazily or how delicious the intoxicating and masculine his scent changed into. I attempted to push the reality that I noticed how horny he seemed as his head drooped as he whispered and you have to know I need you his hot breath washed over my face and that I may want to scent the peppermint odor. I had no manipulate over what I used to be doing, my mind barely registered the tiny voice that shouted for me to forestall. Neither did thoughts of the reason behind it fleet through my mind as I leaned in the direction of his willing head, flickering my eyes to his parted lips, and that I noticed how his tongue darted out barely to his lips. Inching toward him BPOV. He become there at the landing. Status tremendously near Elena, so near that one move closer and their lips could be touching. However, before I could permit the jealousy to enrage me, I remembered that he changed into my friend and he predicted me to be supportive, so I plastered on a fake smile and introduced my arrival through loudening my step on the ground than my normal whisper. Elena seemed startled by way of my presence because she jumped. Her eyes held disappointment and gratefulness, probably because she didn't need to regret something later, but Damon just smirked despite the fact that I ought to see his frustration changed into clear with the crease that had shaped on his forehead. It wasn't that I had anything in opposition to Elena, I did not. She seemed like a decent man or woman, and she became loving, caring and dependable towards her friends. I might visible how she gave Damon a risk and made him show his humanity. It truly is were given to mean she's doing something proper. As his buddy, I could not forestall him from the individual he cherished, mainly because that whinge Catherine. Howdy, did you sort the whole lot out with Alaric? Putting on my best friendly face. Yep, he determined to spend time with Jenna anyway. Ooh, Buffy's gonna get some, Damon joked, making Elena roll her eyes at his commentary. How's Bonnie? She's with Stefan, searching after Caroline. Does she realize approximately the party? Wanting to make this day unique for Damon. Yes, I informed her, however, like the rest folks, she feels we've got different matters to worry approximately, Elena replied, sarcasm dripping in her voice. All the extra motive for us to do this, they all wished this, just sooner or later, in which we did not think of lunatic vampires and other supernatural beings obtainable. Just one night time. Me and Bonnie are going to shopping for a get dressed. I gotta perform a little matters, Damon pitched in together with his standard indistinct solution. What are you as much as? Elena wondered him, her chin jutted up anticipating concealed answer. You'd think she'd have learnt by now that Damon wasn't an inexpensive man. Would not you like to know? His smirk again as he winked at her. In go back she appeared away, tucking in strands of hair behind her ear. Do you want a trip, Elena? He requested her, and she or he frowned earlier than answering. Seeing as I came with Stefan's vehicle, sure. Damon purposefully reached over Elena's head to get the keys, making her breathe, hitch which made him smile secretly, after which painfully gradual went back to his spot to smirk at her, letting her understand he knew. My chest constricted with his functional motion, however I fast erased the pointless feelings by reciting the square root of pi backwards, but this didn't last long when Damon's attractive voice pulled me out of the thoughts as he stated to Elena, let us go, infant, then looped his arm round her waist. However, she jumped far from him and grew to become round to growl at him. 1. I am now not your toddler. Hold your palms to yourself, she snapped, then flung the door open, after which stormed out. Damon pivoted on his footing to wink at me, and I again it with a masked expression. Glad birthday, Damon, I smiled to him, and he flashed in front of me, cupping my face, after which kissed my forehead. You're the first individual to mention that. Are you positive you don't want me to stay? We ought to play video games prime with less garments, he teased, but as lots as I wanted to jump his bones, I resisted. You need to recognize after you're long gone, I will be strolling round your private home. My hands trailed up his arm, my voice was deeper as I finished my sentence, only to whisper bear. A glad smile graced my lips to see him shiver in satisfaction. I knew he was interested in me to a degree, and I did have an effect on him in a few methods, otherwise why had he's never mind. It wouldn't be smart for me to consider that proper now. You're too tempting in your personal exact, Miss Swan, he whispered in a gruff voice. As are you, Mr. Salvatore, my voice matched his. My tongue slipped out to lick my lips and watched as his gaze dropped to my mouth. He slowly moved closer, as did I, mirroring his movements, however then I snapped lower back to truth whilst remembering that his love become in the automobile, waiting for him, same person he'd nearly to kissed a few minutes ago. You need to pass. Elena's anticipating you, reminding him, and scrutinized cautiously as he blinked, frustration as he regarded down at me, a crease had shaped on his brow. Yeah, well, I wager I will be seeing you. He nevertheless appeared worried, I assured him with a nod. I may not invite many people, his shoulders slumping, without problems. You have softened, Salvatore, I joked, however his eyes darkened and his jaw clenched. I could see his muscle tissue tighten below his shirt. Any requests for the birthday party? Seeking to move his thoughts away from my mistake earlier than. His response was in all likelihood due to his worry to let all and sundry see his humanity. Plenty of hot girls and I am cool, he shrugged, tugging at his leather-based jacket. I will be there was my response. Our teasing changed into automatic. It couldn't be helped, however it also helped extra my sexual electricity into our little innuendos. You were proper, he responded. Don't strive peeking. I'll put a lock spell on the door once you've got left, he groaned with my phrases, however I clearly laughed at him. You don't combat truthful, he pouted, so I patted his head so he shook it stubbornly. When you carried out, visit the Mystic Grill, the bartender will hand you something. What something? He eyed me skeptically. You may find out. Use what he gives you and then display up at 8, telling him of his commands. Understanding he wouldn't argue, however alternatively certainly sighed in defeat but jumped the sound of the horn. He sauntered and I accompanied to close the door behind him. Do not burn the house down with our absence, he warned me, making me scoff. By Isa, he leaned down to kiss my forehead, so I reveled in the quick experience of his mild lips planted softly on my skin. He pulled lower back to smirk and then waved before strolling towards Elena's, honking. I am coming, I am coming. Maintain your thong on, I heard him name to her. His words made me shake my head, however I couldn't hold the smirk off my face. By Damon, my voice become barely a whisper as my arms gently driven the door close, and that I slumped down it. I used to be biting off extra than I ought to bite. BPOV. Inside 3 hours, I might ordered an unhealthy amount of food, locked away Damon's alcohol that shouldn't be touched, replacing it with reasonably priced 21st century alcohol but additionally a few champagne. ID decided to make it semi-formal and advised Elena to inform the others she invited. Music turned into looked after it might be combination of a number of Damon's favorites set up in a 90s-looking juke field on the returned, however additionally the trending songs for the birthday party goers who may want to choose their preference. It had taken quite a few paintings for the decorating. The primary shades had been black and burgundy Damon colors. All of the vintage furnishings became now hauled to an exceptional room to clear the parlor and the primary dwelling room, as that was in which it might all take place. I would adorn the usage of burgundy and black scarves and having them placing above tay ceilings, and acquired a black espresso table for the snacks and liquids. I would gotten some strobe light contraptors that have been already on flashing lighting fixtures. It appearance extra fantastic while it become darkish. ID ordered 4 black leather sofas which I might located in a corner to create area for dancing. Basically the whole thing changed into equipped aside from me. Elena had known as telling me that she changed into with Bonnie and Caroline and they might be coming over in 5 minutes. I might prepared photographs for them to loosen them up for the night time. I might already gotten my get dressed at the same time as ordering meals. My dress was a crimson strapless get dressed that reached mid-thigh, and I would be carrying that with matching scarlet heels. If Edward noticed me now, he would not accept as true with his sight. His little risk magnet sporting loss of life traps voluntarily. I saddened with the notion as it jogged my memory how a lot our courting turned into based totally on secrets and lies from both people. Earlier than I could tricky on those mind, the door turned into open to raveling a smiling Elena standing next to a timid Bonnie in a green tee with a gray cardigan on top alongside black denim jeans and brown Uggs, and a curious Caroline dressed in a quick white sun get dressed, sunshades located on pinnacle of her head. All of them carried wherein I was safe to expect held their clothes for their night time. Howdy girlies, I greeted them with a cheery tone to ease their worry. They regarded to loosen up a little as they walked in, gasping at the sight of the converted room. Oh my gosh, Elena gasped as Shatum in her surroundings. This region appears high quality, Bonnie complimented. This is so cool. It is so. Damony, I attempted, hoping they had affirmed my thoughts. Precisely, Elena nodded. I could see the disappointment flash in her eyes, but she quick erased it with a smile. Gotta hand it you do recognize how to throw a party, Caroline complimented, making me smile, and I then remembered her scenario. How are you doing, Caroline? I asked, being as polite as I ought to. Been higher. Thank God I were given out of the residence. I concept ID die of boredom being caught in her. Thanks for the necklace via the way she thanked me, and I welcomed her with a nod and a simple smile. Are available permitting them to input, and we sat crossed-legged on the ground. Best to satisfy you men. You too, you appear exceptional, Bonnie smiled, but the uncertainty become in her eyes. My suspicions had been showed when she held out her hand for me to take, and Caroline and Elena looked at me, looking ahead to my true character. I get it. You need a reading. You need to recognize if I am virtually a pleasing person or if it is just an act they shared a responsible appearance between every different. Bonnie started out to drop her hand, however I grabbed it. Did I bypass the test? Sorry, it is Zhu. Bonnie commenced to explain, but I stopped her, conserving my palm up. You want to shield your friends. I get that. Especially beneath the instances shrugging off their guilt. I would do the same. You definitely first-rate, Caroline blurted out as if it turned into surprising. Why are you so surprised? Well, Elena said you have been Damon's nice friend, so Bonnie elaborated, and that I laughed, piecing what they were pronouncing. They hadn't anticipated a nice character to be friends with Damon. I never knew Damon had a high-quality buddy, Caroline scoffed, observing me incredulously. I didn't realize Damon had any pals that were not forced, Bonnie clarified, and I laughed on the statement. It truly is 'cause you all met the Damon that changed into screwed over my Catherine. I met him before all that. Wow, what changed into that like? Damon was he changed into type, caring, sweet, however he still had that smirk I brought making them giggle. He turned into able to love and trust. Catherine honestly messed him up, huh? Caroline asked. All I could do became nod. You should met him within the 1800s. He became virtually kinda shy. Damon shy? Bonnie snorted. They all cracked up. I cannot imagine that, Elena delivered among her chuckles. I am gonna take hold of a drink, she stated, still giggling, and I nodded to encourage her. She went directly to the kitchen whilst I remained with the women as we sat at the ground. Tell us greater. I need to use it in opposition to him later. Properly he become nonetheless a charmer. Sexy as hell, however, had this kind of self-cognizance. Very funny. He continually knew how to make me chortle. Short pause. Caroline held up her hand like I would execute it earlier than, and I stopped from my trance of reminiscences to look at her with confusion. So when did you understand you fell for him? After or earlier than Catherine? She asked, and that I raised my brows. That apparent, huh? Kinda. Bonnie smiled warily. So she too waited for the answer. How may want I answer? I ought to simply pretend I failed to recognize what they were speaking approximately and shrug it off, but I may want to tell them the reality. I was about to mention after, once I remembered our first come upon and how I was willing to offer something to save his existence. Earlier than answering absolutely, unhappiness seeped through, and that I lowered my head, playing with the hem of my top. I bet I iced over with my phrases with Elena's go back. What are we talking about? She entered a tray in he palms as she brought in 4 glasses of lemonade. Just speak me approximately the past, retaining the reality vague, but I should see it wasn't enough to satisfy Elena. Discreetly, I sent a warning glance to Caroline and Bonnie. Happily, Elena hadn't caught us. More vital topics. What will you be wearing to the birthday celebration? Caroline asked. I dispatched a grateful look to her, hoping she stuck onto my gratefulness for saving me of an ungainly moment. And LBD, my solution became passive as I picked up my drink. Huh. Bonnie and Elena appeared at a loss for words, but not Caroline, as she spoke back for me with a duh expression. Little black, get dressed, she knowledgeable them for me, then delivered properly at S7.20 now, which means that we're given 40 minutes to get geared up. No longer sufficient time in any respect, she complained. You a vampire. I am positive you could make it work. Caroline held a calculating expression as she contemplated over what I said. I am gonna get ready. You will possibly be performed earlier than me, so you'll be letting humans in, clapping my fingers and zooming upstairs, but no longer earlier than listening to Elena tell her buddies Permit move get equipped in Stefan's. As soon as I was interior Damon's room, I walked to his private toilet, decorated with a lot of high-priced marble and manifestly real gold. Not anything is too much for Damon, I concept with a chortle. I switched at the bathe. Even as awaiting the water to warmness up, I started to strip off my garments, however paused once I heard my phone vibrate, and that I rushed to acquire it from the bedside desk. Yellow greeting the caller, forgetting to test the caller id. Bella. The familiar velvet voice breathed out, piercing into my chest with the sound. I knew that the voice most effective belonged to one individual, and because of that understanding, the air rushed out of my lungs with the familiarity of his gentle tone, which had held lies all this time. The voice I might wish so many times to hear once more, and turned into now real. Edward, gasping out the phrase with a choked sob that grated my throat. Bella, he confirmed with what appeared like a relieved sigh. His voice brought back the memories in flashes. How defensive his palms had been as he stopped the van from crushing me. How lovely he looked standing in the middle of the meadow with the solar developing glistening effect on his pores and skin. How his lips have been a whisper on mine. But alongside these reminiscences the ones I held last filled my mind. How excited I would been to subsequently want to expose what I used to be to him. How when I noticed him that day, I used to be struck with worry. How his silence had delivered a million words, however I was in denial to need to take note of the warning. How when he grew to become to me, his eyes contemplated a fiery rage but held battle. His face distorted into a grimace as he informed me I wasn't correct enough. How I looked for him for what appeared countless but deeply understanding he changed into already long gone. Bella, he asked again, and without every other notion, I growled in frustration and threw the cell phone on the wall. Starting my tempo up and down the constrained space, I pushed my hair out of my face as I bit my nails. Courageous togs. Why? What? Why? Why did he name now? What did he need in any case this time? What had he anticipated me to do? Why? Just why? What am I alleged to do now? Finally my knees gave in and I fell to the ground in a crumpled heap. Isabel, Elena's kind voice referred to as for me with a tender knock on the door. Yeah, UK, she requested, and that I just shook my head. Despite the fact that she could not see me, I had a feeling he knew because the door opened to show her already in her dress. Road 7 it changed into a scarlet dress with a skirt that flared that reached mid-thigh that had one sleeve however stood barefoot. She stored her vervain necklace however additionally delivered a gold ring with a red stone and a gold bangle with a rose. Her brown hair became in waves and he or she looked extraordinary. "You appearance absolutely amazing," I complimented her, and she or he gave a susceptible smile. I heard something crash. Are you okay?" she asked, and I glanced at the cell phone that become now broken into pieces at the ground. She accompanied my gaze and then snapped her eyes back to me. "I am fine. Status from my location. I am gonna pass bathe now." It became my way of aspect monitoring her already constructing questions, and that I should see the interest was getting the better of her, so I walked into the toilet. Stripping off my clothes, I were given into the bathroom and pressured my mind to most effective focus on how warm the water become and the way the steam became constructing in the cubicle. My thoughts desired to wander back to what simply befell, however I would not let it. As an alternative I started out to recite antique nursery rhymes, trying to neglect. I needed to forget about. The whole thing I did turned into mechanical now as I washed my hair, lathered my frame, rinsed it at the side of my hair. I curled my hair and then clipped it on one aspect, applied minimum blood red lipstick and mascara with light use of black eyeliner. Once I used to be finished, I got out, wrapped a towel around myself and went to find my dress. I might sold a brand new one for these days. It became additionally horny purple, but in preference to flared it clung to my hips and additionally reached mid-thigh. It had layers of folds on the lover line, and I might accessorized with black and gold Chanel jewelry and matched the complete outfit with pale gold ankle spiky heeled boots. My movements endured to be mechanical as I placed on the get dressed and the jewelry. Searching at myself at the mirror, I used to be content with the picture. Nothing like Elena, but appropriate sufficient. Outdoor, I could hear a massive wide variety of voices that have been unknown and song that I known as Stars Take Me to the Insurrection. With a deep sigh, I opened the door. The voices have become louder, and searching over the banister, I saw a big cluster of the tops of human beings' heads. This night I would now not consider what passed off. I would go down and drink myself to oblivion. Tonight turned into all about Damon. Just Damon. Not me. Some other gust of breath rushed into my lungs with another deep breath. Slowly I walked down the stairs in the direction of the celebration, but iced up whilst seeing Damon within the apparel I might gotten for him. He become looking attractive inside the white shirt, but he rolled the sleeves up with a black waistcoat and smart black trousers and black shoes. I knew he looked brilliant in it the minute I noticed the mannequin dressed in it. My coronary heart sank after I saw who became next to him, Elena, looking extraordinary, and she or he put on red heels to match the get dressed. With some other shake of my head I repeated the mantra simply: Damon. No longer me. Just Damon. No longer me. Fuck that, I want a drink or 2 or 20. DPOV. Seeing as Issa had kicked me out of the residence, and I knew it might be wise for me to no longer even try sneaking a preview, so I decided to move on our planned trip. Besides, maybe I would find out greater. So I might long gone all of the manner to Duke College and discovered Isabel's workplace. After spending hours and locating nothing, I'd given up but thankfully found a e-book titled Petrova. This can be used to my benefit later once I bribed Elena. As soon as I used to be done, I drove lower back to the house, but whilst I used to be approximately 2 minutes away, I remembered what Issa had advised me to do, so grudgingly I turned round, riding lower back wherein I came from and headed toward the Mystic Grill. Scanning the room, my eyes landed on a cumbersome bartender in his blue tea blouse and black jeans uniform searching instantly at me as he held a large white container. His eyes were immobile, so I knew it was him due to his trance-like state. Damon Salvatore he driven the field out for me to take. With an exaggerated groan I took the field, but I couldn't deny I felt some exhilaration as to what changed into inner. There has been no corporation brand, so you could not be clued into what it turned into. Smart ass Bella. Isabel stated you exchange in rest room, he knowledgeable me, and that I grinned. Change. This meant that she'd gotten me clothes. You need to change inside the toilet. Bella had compelled him to no longer take no for an answer. God, she became so continual. Oh terrific, rolling my eyes when beginning the box to find clothes folded neatly. She stated you hire trade or she'll do it herself, he told me with the same catatonic tone. Nicely, I wouldn't mind that. Thanks friend, I smacked his arm, walking past him and went into the rest room. As soon as interior, I opened the box and located on pinnacle were black trousers, which I did not thoughts after which discovered beneath turned into a white button-down blouse and a black waistcoat and a bowler hat. Snapping out my smartphone, I dialed her variety, but it really beeped and went to voicemail. With a pissed-off groan, I dialed Elena's range. Her cell phone rang for some seconds earlier than she answered with a dramatic sigh. What do you want, Damon? She asked. Preserve the mindset, Missy, or did you overlook you re-talking to a vampire? Joking with her, but it failed to work along with her. Perhaps it became due to her consistent grasp to Stefan. I failed to forget about, but meaning I also failed to forget about the way you killed Jeremy, she sneered, and the guilt commenced to scream for interest. However, I fought to maintain my switch off. Oh Elena, that became the past. We're in the gift. Can't we simply pass on? She did not answer. However, I should pay attention. Her respiratory become heavier as she notion of what I'd stated. It might honestly suck if we weren't buddies, revealing some of what I felt to her, hoping it would act in my favor. After some moments, I gave up and moved on, no longer trying her to recognize I was harmed with her silence. I have tried to call Issa due to a positive cloth wardrobe malfunction, however I do not seem to get via. I do not know her that properly, however I recognize she's upset about something, Elena stammered. Why? What's incorrect? I requested. We were converting and we stopped whilst we heard a crash, and whilst checking on her, I found her at the floor, tears down her dace, and on the other side of the room, her smartphone turned into beaten into little portions, Elena defined. I would they made a few inspuriate comment approximately her changing, however listening to that Issa become disappointed conquered even the cocky jackass I used to be. I am on my manner, I instructed her and snapped the cell phone shut. Speedy, I were given into the clothes and rushed placed of the bathroom. What should they triggered her to be so indignant? Or should I be asking who? Damon, Sheriff Forbes known as after me. Straining a smile, I turned round to hold up with my act. Sheriff giving her a smile. Is there something incorrect? Hoping she wouldn't need to keep me for long. No, I used to be. Caroline advised me there might be a celebration in your residence. She smiled at me, however an issue turned into held in her eyes. Yes. Stefan wanted to have a bit get together, I lied smoothly, understanding she didn't count on something. Are you going to be there? She questioned, and I ought to see she turned into concerned. Of root. A room full of hormonal young adults wishes supervision, grinning at her and almost laughing as she sighed. I am not precisely classed as the suitable grown-up. I might been making plans to drink my fucking ass off. Correct. Top. Thanks, she smiled. She turned into kinda okay. You could see how she desired to guard the people she cared about, and that I reputable her for that. I ought to pass now, they have got in all likelihood started explaining my short go out. Well, you look first rate, she complimented, and I supplied a thanks. See ya, she waved me off and I returned the goodbye before going for walks out of the grill and into my car. Pushing the speed a little further, I arrived on the residence later than Issa had anticipated me to. Slowly I parked behind the large numbers of cars taking on space within the driveway. Meaningless teenage chatter changed into loud as the voices got here from interior. However, the curtains have been closed so I couldn't see what become going on. Music was loud, surrounding the whole house. It changed into a few alternative band gambling. Curiosity got the pleasant of me so I got out of the automobile, slammed the door and walked within the house. Gaping, I was wonder at how one of a kind the residence seemed. Consider Issa to move this far nonetheless I kinda favored the colors and it become clever of her to create space for dancing however in those modern instances, it was practically sex with garments on as I noticed many teens coupled and grinding in opposition to each different. If best they might pass return to the 1800s where even a kiss turned into frowned upon until you were married. Women had been dressed in skimpy clothes and that they turned to examine me with longing eyes not feeding my ego or something but I did pay attention severe voices whispered approximately how warm I looked. I recognized some faces from the high school but maximum of them had been unknown to me. Hello I drawled as I winked to more than one ladies. Then I spotted Elena grabbing a drink, she grew to become and I took in her look. She appeared lovable in her crimson flared dress and matching footwear. Her hair was in waves nowadays rather than immediately. Well done to you appearance I attempted to come up with an adjective however paused when searching on the descending parent that got here in the direction of us. Isabel. Delicious I breathed out while seeing her dressed in a decent crimson dress that clung to her, displaying the curves that she was blessed with, her legs appeared to elongate with the heels. She had on her signature purple lipstick and minimum makeup no longer that she wished it. Her hair became all vivid. In curls however she piled up on her head and left unfastened curls to fall down the facet of her face. I wasn't the simplest one that noticed due to the fact the men had began to drool along with her presence and for a few motive that bothered me. Lots. Hoping she seen me, I used to be out of success while she grabbed a beer bottle from the table, downed the drink in seconds and grabbed every other. I watched as she grabbed a random man who failed to seem to thoughts as she walked them to the dance ground and commenced to grind up on him like the young adults. Anger flared in me as I watched her rub herself up and down the already attractive human while taking gulps of the beer. Something's no longer proper I muttered with a grimace. What is it? Elena requested but I neglected her and crossed the room and pulling Issa to me but she resisted. Isabel. Calling to her. Hey Damon she flashed a wide smile which didn't contact her eyes at all. Something turned into sincerely wrong. Hi there all of us. She called out and people stopped to turn to her. Birthday boy is here she pointed to me with a snicker. Absolutely everyone shouted glad birthday and a number of cheers broke out. Isabel. Shaking her a little however she simply giggled. Glad birthday my sexy first-rate pal she slurred, chugging down extra of her drink then appeared up at me with a grin. Isabel. What is wrong? Cupping her cheek to pressure her to take a look at me when seeing she was purposefully looking at others to keep away from my gaze. Nothing's the matter she said softly then grabbed every other beer bottle. Now drink up. We got to rejoice she advised handing me the bottle. Don't lie to me Isabel. It's insulting which you anticipate me to trust that you excellent when you in reality now not growling at her and subsequently her mask dropped to expose the crushing ache she changed into feeling that now had the weight of it falling onto me. What's up Belle? The fucker from before turned into at the back of her wanting some other grind consultation. Later she whispered to me in as brief as it fell, it again and this time I ought to see she flick the switch. Allow us just experience this please she pleaded and that I nodded, reluctantly letting her move. Allow us birthday celebration she screamed and more human beings shouted. She backed to the guy from earlier then and a brand new track started out to play. It became Justin Timberlake Future Sex Love Sound. Dance with me a sorority girl requested from at the back of me. She was blonde, faux knockers, dressed so tight and brief, her ass become probably protruding to expose her thong if she bent over inside the slightest. Wanting a distraction but also to keep an eye on Issa and Mr. Handsy, I said yes and we moved to bounce amongst the alternative crowded bodies. I noticed Elena and Stefan who arrived and was marvel when seeing him improve his beer bottle to me while Elena simply scowled at me. With a smirk, I permit the busty blonde slide down me making Elena extra disgusted then she grabbed Stefan and kissed his lips fiercely if proving something. A mild ache hit my chest remembering how she pushed away proper after Catherine. Quick, I chugged down the beer and grabbed another. It wasn't as sturdy as my scotch however I wanted it. My call Claire the blonde instructed me so I became my attention to her. I am Damon, I whispered in her ear pretty loudly so he ought to hear me over the loud music. Oh, I recognize, she grinned and endured to rub herself throughout me. And I am Catherine, her voice sounded from behind me, and I groaned internally as I grew to become around to face the girl that I'd wasted my lifestyles on. You failed to actually assume I might leave out your birthday, did you? What are you doing here? My voice seethed with venom as I glared at Catherine. Elena, did you just change? The blonde who I'd forgotten the name. Chloe anyway called to me with a sickeningly sweet voice. No, I've been like this all this time, Catherine answered. Looking down, I saw her in a simple black sleeveless dress that reached mid-thigh. She was still a slutty bitch, good to know. Why don't you walk away now, she compelled the sorority girl Carly. I am gonna go now, she said and walked off. I watched her move on to another guy and they both began to dance. You just cost me meaningless sex and dinner, snapping at her, but she waved it off as she leaned closer to me. She was slightly shorter, so I had to look down slightly as I glared at her. I felt so stupid to have wasted my eternity looking for someone I loved that wasn't even lost. Hatred washed through me as she leaned in even closer, her breath warming my lips as she whispered in her manipulative bitch tone. "You'll get over it." Grabbing her arm, I questioned her. Stupid of you to come here when Elena is less than 2 feet away. Was she really that idiotic to expose herself in front of the humans? Answer: yes, she was. Couldn't an old friend drop in to say happy birthday? She smiled with her usual pout as she trailed her fingers up my chest, but I shrugged her off. Our last encounter happened to be fresh on my mind. Old friends can, but we don't allow dogs in the house. My savior stood behind Catherine, taunting her. BPOV. I'd been dancing with the college guy Jay, who was very hands-on, and the alcohol was telling me that I liked it. I wanted to feel like someone wanted me. I need to feel that, and Jay was that solution as he worked his fingers up my body. He began to suck on the nape of my neck as I downed another beer, and his lips continued to lick and suck my neck, collarbone. I wish I could say that his lips were eliciting some hidden fiery emotion that seemed to rise only with Damon and had began to with Edward, but his lips held no fascination, so I'd excused myself to go get a drink while he remained to boast to his college mates about his new victory and receive the glory that he wanted. When stumbling towards the table full of food and drinks, I paused halfway there when hearing her voice. That voice: no, not here, not today. Pivoting on my heels, my assumptions were confirmed when seeing her across the room in a sleeveless black dress that was so simple but looked so sexy. I took another pang on my self-confidence when seeing how amazing she looked, and I am sure Damon had notched the fact with the way he was bending down close to look at her. Even through his anger, his anguish for a lost love was visible, at least to me. Walking towards them, I heard as Catherine attempted to talk in a sweet childlike voice, but it just seethed with her fake nature that it sounded pathetic. Couldn't an old friend drop in to say happy birthday? My anger was flared as she placed her bony fingers down his chest like I'd just previously done. Old friends can, but we don't allow dogs in the house, I interrupted, clearly being controlled my erupting emotions. My, is that the sweet little Isabel? She continued to use the voice which made my fingers ball up in a tight fist, ready to resort to violence if necessary. Let's take this somewhere else. What, with all these witnesses? I returned in an equally sweet sarcastic tone. Her eyes narrowed and she shook her head, then wrapped herself around Damon, whose expression shifted from curious to my words and then quickly into a disgusted expression as he attempted to pull away. I'd rather stay. I am having way too much fun. She winked at him. I wasn't asking. My words rolled out into a menacing growl as I gripped her arm, but she simply rolled her eyes, which angered me further, so I began to play with her mind a little. Satisfaction filled me as I watched her let go off Damon, instead clutching her head in the excruciating pain I inflicted. Fortunately, her cries were drowned out with the thumping beats of Britney Spears' big fat bass. Once I'd gotten her attention, I stopped and looked at her with a smug smirk. You wouldn't want to mess with me, Katerina. I am older and stronger than Bonnie, and I wouldn't think twice about staking you, I threatened her, having the satisfaction that my menacing words had an effect as I saw her flinch slightly. I am giving you 2 options. Either you leave now or I remove you, myself raising an eyebrow as I waited for her to make some smart remark, but when she didn't, I smirked, knowing I'd won. Without another word, She cast a glance behind me and I turned following her stare, which was directed at Stefan and Elena, who were laughing and dancing oblivious as the rest of the other attendants to the danger that surrounded them. Stefan must be really into whatever Elena was saying to not notice his ex was only a few feet away. "I've got better things to do anyway," she sneered. Mischief sparkled in her eyes and then flashed out of the room, quicker than anyone could see. "Coward," was my final whispered sneer at her, but she'd already left, but we both knew it wasn't the last time we'd be seeing her again. "You okay?" Damon asked me. Her hands were rubbing up and down my arm in a comforting, friendly way. His eyes held worry for me and I immediately felt guilty. There was something weird about how quick she gave up commenting on Catherine's appearance. She's just being Catherine. I enjoyed how he spat out her name with anger. "It wasn't about me today. Just Damon. I wanted to give you one day without ex-girlfriends or enemies trying to kill you, but it seems to be impossible," breathing out the words in great defeat. It seemed impossible to give him that one thing. "Hey, the night's not over yet." He tilted my chin up, looking into my eyes. "And I am very grateful that you went through all the trouble just for me." He hugged me to him and we swayed a little, even though it was too slow for the fast beats of the song. I didn't really care, because the feeling of his arms around me and the comfort brought as I laid my head on his chest was enough for me. Suddenly the music changed and Rod Stewart, "Do You Think I Am Sexy?" began to fill the room. Pushing away from Damon, I looked up at him, question in my eyes with a hitched brow, as if silently asking if he could remember our song. "If you want my body and you think I am sexy, come on sugar, let me know," I sang to him, and the corner of his lips turned upwards. He whipped me around so my back was pressed onto his front. I threw an arm behind me to wrap around his neck as I ground on his pelvis and then slid up and down on his growing erection. "If you really need me, just reach out and touch me. Come on honey, tell me so. Tell me so, baby." His voice was husky as he breathed in my ear. His fingers were gripping my hips to then turn me back around to face him. My fingers locked around his neck, closing any space between us, and he slid his palm up my dress while I sang in hitched breaths due to his burning touch. Two total strangers, but that ain't what they rethinking. Outside it's cold misty. My words were interrupted when a flash went through my mind and I watched as the image played in my mind. DPOV. Seeing Issa deal with Catherine kinda turned me on, especially the insanely hot look she had when she was mad. That fire reminded me of our past when she unleashed her hidden wildcat nature. Thinking of that day brought back our intimate memories when we fucked like rabbits. There was even one time, we didn't leave the house for 3 days due to being occupied. Yes, I rocked her world. Me and Issa were on fire together and I loved every second of it, never wanted it to stop, but apparently she did. Something had changed and had caused her to leave. As much as I wanted to ask her what I didn't want to scare her off again, so I decided to leave it. For a while, I was simply content with having Issa in my arms as it felt so right, and I found pleasure as she inhaled my scent and then made a silent sound. I wasn't going to judge, seeing I did it all the time, and I reveled in her signature strawberry scent of her hair. When the Rod Stewart song came on, the wild cat came out as she ground into me, setting every fiber of my being set alight. She was eliciting our past feelings that I'd tried to bury deep but were slowly sufficing. I'd growled in her ear and then whipped her around to face me. She locked eyes with me as she wound her fingers around my neck. My fingers, however, never left her hips, and I watched as her adorable pink pouty lips sang the song word by word. Suddenly she stopped, frozen in my arms, her eyes staring through me. Fingers gripped my arm tightly, her nails bit into my skin and her breathing became erratic. She was having a vision. Issa, shaking her slightly to snap her out of her daze. Issa, my voice was louder this time. She shook her head, her gaze focused on me, and then her expression turned into horror-struck as she quickly ripped herself away from my arms and ran out the door. Issa, without another thought, I ran after her. From the corner of my eye I saw Stefan disentangle himself from Elena and make his way towards the door. He'd seen it too. Once I was outside, I looked from the left to the right but saw nothing. That was when I heard the scream coming from the woods behind the house. I began to run, following the source of the sound. Then I slowly came towards a clearing in the middle of the forest. All that was going through my mind was, not Isabel. Please, not Isabel. Pushing through the tree's branches, I skidded to a stop, my eyes bugged out of their sockets as I watched the scene unveil. We are so fucked. DPOV. All my thoughts were mangled as they sifted through my mind with no real meaning, but I forced myself to think. Within a flash, I was by Issa's side, who was cradling her arm, and the bleeding wound on her arm had stained her red dress, which had slashes on the front, but also strands of her hair. She ignored my touch but continued to stare at the creature before us with anger emanating from her. It growled at her, its figure trembling, and then took a step forwards but kept its gaze at Issa. "Get mad away from here," Issa barked out at Barbie, who stood there with fear as she nodded her head, quickly pulled up her knocked-out boyfriend and rushed away. "What the fuck is going on?" Growling aloud in hopes she'd answer, but nothing happened. No emotion flickered in her, and it seemed that she hadn't registered what I'd said. "Talk to me when you not a much," she spat out at it, which growled menacingly but not at Issa, but instead had the fucking never to snarl at me. I would kill it, but it was more of Stefan's territory. "Go now," she snapped, and I watched as it began to run off deeper into the woods. She sighed and then picked herself up, using me and the bark of the tree for support. Groaning the entire time, and the spin was clear on her face. "Issa." This time my tone held fear with the gruff voice I used. She snapped her head to me, reached the arm cradling the bleeding on, to cup my face and then give a small smile, but the fright was in her eyes. Oh my gosh, what happened?" Elena and Stefan came into the clearing. Her hand dropped back to cradle her injury. She flickered her sight to the sky and then turned to answer us with the worst attempt of a smile. "Not today. We've got a party to get to." Leaving us struck, she began to limper back towards the house, and I could hear the sounds of the teenagers as they continued to party in my house. How oblivious they were to the supernatural world around them. Snapping my attention back to Issa, I flashed in front of her and she narrowed her eyes at my actions. "If you think I am going to just go back to that party when you clearly hurt you seriously, don't know me?" Scolding her attempts to try to sidetrack us. "What just happened?" Stefan puzzled aloud the question that haunted all our minds. Just then Malibu Barbie ran back into the clearing, still in her little lilac number. "Isabel, I am so sorry. We didn't know. I compelled Matt to forget, and I am so sorry. Are you okay? I don't even know where it came fro." "Caroline, take a breather," she interrupted her, and then held her head high again. Her eyes flickered to the moon, but then her eyes darkened as she turned to look deep into the woods where the wolf had ran off to add snarled the words, "Thought I told you to leave." We turned to where she was looking when we saw Catherine emerge with a smug smirk as she folded her arms over her chest. "You don't look so good," Catherine taunted Issa, and I watched as she took a threatening step forwards. "You planned this," she seethed, not cradling her arm anymore, and I think the reason was to not show weakness to Catherine. "Couldn't have you coming between my plans now, could I?" She walked closer to us, revealing her whole self from the shadowed forest. "There's always a plan B, or C or D, excreta, she added with a sickening bitter tone. "Well, I hope you happy for the first time through this." I watched hopelessness crash onto Issa. Her voice had even wavered and I could see the fright take over her. "Immensely," Catherine answered. Their stare down continued, and it seemed Issa was becoming weaker under Catherine's stare. It enraged me that Catherine was able to elicit this from me, so I acted on anger and took Catherine by the throat and crashed her onto a nearby tree. "What are you talking about?" Giving her my best "you better not mess with me" glare, but of course she wasn't fazed. "Dear sweet Damon," Catherine came forwards to stroke my jaw, but I jutted away from her, slamming her head more into the bark and hearing the tree groan in protest. "Damon," Issa called from behind me, her warm fingers on my shoulder. Turning around, we locked eyes. "Let her go," she whispered so softly it almost seemed to blend with the wind. With one more angered push of her head on the tree, I pushed away from her. "I'll see you all later then." Catherine gave her mischievous wink, then inclined her head towards Issa again. A growl fell from my lips. "Maybe not you, Issa," she smirked, and the answer was nagging at me, pricking my mind, screaming at me for attention. Without another thought, Issa snapped a branch off the tree, charged at Catherine, knocked her down and began to aim for the chest, but I acted by instinct to push her away. Catherine had already taken off, so I turned to look at Issa, who surprised me by her growl, then when picking herself up onto her knees, then pushed her tresses out of her face to glare at me. "It's always her. It's always going to be her," she choked out between heart-wrenching sobs, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched desperately at her chest. My diners reached up to her. Her eyes flickered up to my arm, but then she dragged herself from the ground, Cradling her arm, she shook her head mumbling something to herself, but before I could say something she already took off. She left. Left me. BPOV. My whole night time became spent in an abandoned warehouse in Georgia in my pink tattered get dressed. I might misplace the outfits whilst walking and hadn't troubled to pick them up, no longer wanting to risk being caught. I might stayed with Gloria, however on the other hand Damon killed her too. Damon. His call had haunted my mind, so I hadn't been capable of even sleep in conjunction with the confirming thoughts of death. It changed into simplest account number of time before my life could be no extra in this earth, and this notion continually drew me again to Damon. After how I would left matters, I knew I needed to go lower back. He knew now. He knew how I felt, right? Were my phrases clear enough? Did he recognize now? Those same thoughts had took place in my thoughts in a vicious cycle, and I used to be simplest inside the edge of falling into insanity. It had pained me to look how via his anger closer to Catherine, his love turned into still there. That was the reason he pushed me far from killing her. I should ended it. All of it, however we stopped me and we each knew why. Guilt turned into every other factor that ghosted me, seemingly giving him at some point free of drama was an excessive amount of to invite, particularly on his birthday. The thought of going return to Forks had crossed my mind, but what will be the factor in that? I was at the threshold of the stop besides which turned into why I had to pass returned. Dragging myself off the rigid concrete ground, I closed the grimoire of route I would attempted to look for a treatment, however alas it become of no luck. Guess it is simply my time. I know I should be extra frantic or involved, however unquestionably, I felt okay with it. It wasn't like I would be greatly missed, and I wasn't surely leaving something behind. I wasn't disillusioned, I wasn't nervous, I wasn't irritated. I simply become. Selecting up the grimoire, I tucked it into my appropriate arm and then slowly walked out of the darkened warehouse and into the blinding sunlight of the morning solar or afternoon solar. I wasn't so certain. Time must been an essence, but I failed to definitely care. Grudgingly, I climbed into my vehicle, the Chevrolet ward-off Challenger. It turned into an indulgence, to live life to the fullest, and the as soon as smooth purr of the engine appeared to be mocking me. Posing my palms at the wheel, excruciating pain shot down my arm with the simple movement. I would rip the hem of the skirt of my get dressed to wrap it around the wound, however the purple bruise was showing and the blood had stained my make-do bandage. Tearing my eyes away, I pulled out of the gravel street and into the primary road main again to Mystic Falls. Suddenly, warmth crushed me, so I winded down the window, however that wasn't assisting a whole lot. It turned into turning into insufferable, so I used one hand to fan my face, however not anything turned into assisting. It became so uncomfortable, I veered of the road and braked onto the facet of the street and were given out. Searching around, my imaginative and prescient blurred, so I shook my head looking to clean my tainted sight. Inexperienced of the character world round my thoughts, warmth scorched me in that I attempted to clean my erratic thoughts. Sharp pains shot up and down my arm and that I crumpled right down to the floor with the ache. Mind whipped in my thoughts so hastily that I couldn't decipher what I was thinking. Good day, a voice referred to as to me, and blinking through the blinding daylight delivered to the symptoms of the blurry vision. All I ought to see was a vague figure. Counting on my hearing, it gave the impression of a man, and with this notion, new feelings have been added on. Anger, disappointment, starvation, ache, longing, confusion, uncomfortable, starvation, lust, pain, starvation, hunger, starvation. No, I could not consider his feelings. Consider the results, the guilt, his ache. Hunger. I used to be hungry, I hadn't eaten in days. I used to be so hungry. Omit, he referred to as again with more worry, my hands fisted into the earth, grounding it in my fingertips. As he neared me, I may want to listen the thumping of his heartbeat, barely quicker than an everyday heartbeat, that could display his subconscious fear. I really like it when they are scared, makes the quest more a laugh. Why you need to, you ought to run. My voice became hoarse and gruff, the words scratching at my throat. What? The thump grew louder and faster and his respiratory harshened. Last my eyes I fought the urge to lunge and rip at his fragile little neck. The scrumptious potent scent of his blood filled my senses and I dug my fingers further into the ground. It best take a second, why became it so hot? Hunger, very hungry. Run please please run, choking out the phrases even though it hurt. I could feel how the pores and skin under my eyes harden and the veins emerge. I will go get some help, he stuttered, fear in his every word as he stumbled away. Dragging myself up, I used the surface of the auto to support myself. Giving all my power, I lifted myself on my shaky knees. Why is the world transferring so much? Shaky breaths got me standing and respiration heavily, and that I clutched at my chest with a speedy heart that appeared to want to break out, and I wanted to claw it out. Leaving the auto, I started out to run through the bushes to escape before the man came returned. Flashes of color blurred in my vision as I searched my environment, paranoid with the numerous sounds. Blinking through the obscured sight, I attempted to peer however it wasn't helping as an alternative developing a headache, so I fell onto the bark of a tree, sliding to the floor as blackness penetrated through my thoughts. No, Damon, please, no longer, now croaking out before unconsciousness overtook my frame and that I fell to the ground. DPOV. After she run off, I instinctively chased after her. Stefan follows intently behind, however I didn't cast a glance at him. I couldn't lose her now, not again. We hadn't even got to spend a good deal time collectively. Having her lower back in my life, after which being the one to ship her away simply made matters worse. Wherein should she be? What did she imply? It turned into always her. She had appeared so pained, and all I desired to do changed into take it away. Simply hold her and let her recognize that I might continually be there for her. What turned into I doing wrong? How should I repair our tousled lives? How should I make her live? She'll come, returned Stefan. Notion it would be a terrific concept to surely throw that in my face. He didn't have a single clue. He didn't recognize what became happening. Performing on the built-up rage from this fucked up state of affairs, using all that pent-up anger, I pushed him on his chest, inflicting him to fly off right into a cluster of bushes in the far distance. Cracks of bark sounded the wooded area from his crash touchdown. You do not apprehend. She changed into bitten. My phrases were bitter, stinging my tongue as the truth neared revelation. Stefan stood up slowly, virtually aggravated as he dusted himself off as he walked towards me. Ignoring the guilt for what I did, my masked glare remained on my face. And she or he's a vampire, he brought with the roll of his eyes, but I could see the fear settling in. How naive turned into he. Did I need to spell it out for him? She became bitten through a werewolf, and if my research is telling the truth, looking down, not wanting to mention the plane. I did not need to mention it. To make it greater real than it became presupposed to be. What is going to happen? His worry covered his face now, so I regarded up at him to tell him what I had located out in Isabel's university. She'll die. Talking the words aloud made it greater real, and the load of what was occurring crashed down onto me. ELPOV. What took place? Caroline. Turning to my first-class friend, my accusatory tone concerned her as she became frantic along with her rambling. Nicely, the celebration were given crazy with all these people we didn't realize, so me and Matt went out the returned door. We were strolling for some time and he turned into complimenting how cute I regarded in my dress. Caroline. With Isabel. What occurred with Isabel? I am getting there. Me and Matt commenced making out a bit, after which we heard something growl at the back of us. It changed into a wolf, like a absolutely massive wolf. It became so frightening. It started out to jump out at us, but Izzy moved in front of us together with her and it bit her instead. I am so sorry. I failed to imply to Elena. Her words elicited a crippling worry in me. However, she's a vampire, so I am certain she'll be okay. Caroline endured, however her words did no help to my worry. Thinking back to Isabel's arm and the way swollen it were, I doubted the relief of her phrases. Something advised me the entirety turned into no longer okay, so I whipped my phone out to ring Stefan. Howdy, he responded on the first ring. Something sounded off about his tone. Did you discover her? Trying some indication that this wasn't going to make my life any more complicated than it already become. No, why Dawn? Wait, Damon desires to speak to you. Before I ought to protest, I heard shuffling, after which Damon's voice say my name. Elena, he sounded so grave and the panic rose. No sign of joking seemed in his tone as he persevered. I know you hate me and possibly do not want to speak to me, however listen. I waited patiently for what he desired to mention. I am sorry. Catherine were given in my head and I snapped his neck. I got lucky with the hoop and I am sorry. He sounded so defeated and it scared me, for him to reveal this to me. I did not need to forgive him, but I knew I already had. Isabel is gone and I don't know where she is. I am soliciting for you to help me. His respiration became heavy over the phone and his phrases were scaring me so much that I was clutching the smartphone tightly. How I suggest, what am I able to do? What exactly did he want me to do? In spite of everything, I used to be the human in all of this. Witchy powers? Nope. Vampire speed? Nope. Quick reflexes? I could not even seize a ball thrown from 5 toes away. What help could I be? You can do something. He sounded irritated now as he showed what I would been questioning. But your witchy buddy can, he brought in a whisper. I ought to detect the desperation in his tone, trying to find my approval. Bonnie, wouldn't he assist you? I responded, knowing my excellent pal well sufficient to realize she wouldn't want to help any more vampires. She still hated them as they brought hazard to us, and that I doubt she's need to assist Damon, who tried to kill her of everybody. However, she help you, he turned into pleading now. This Damon became so overseas, he turned into usually so sure of himself. So ambitious, by no means fearing anything however proper. Now he sounded susceptible and susceptible. Please Elena, he introduced in a whisper. Isabel must mean lots to him. He changed into performing so one of a kind. Reality be advised, she become a pleasing character. However, for a few purpose I failed to mainly care for her. How she may want to elicit such feelings from Damon was past me, but it also irritated me. Stefan had tried, I had tried, but he didn't. He could not alternate. And abruptly she pops up and he adjustments. He trusts, he cares, he worries, and he loves. Caroline sent me an expectant look as she too waited for my answer. Sighing, I then lifted my palms to ran them through my hair, pushing the fallen strands far from my face. I will do it. DPOV. Elena's words gave me wish, but the dreaded fear changed into nevertheless there. We would stop chasing her, knowing she become long gone, so we remained inside the clearing. However, I knew our next stop become at back to the boarding house. If all goes nicely, Bonnie might be there. You adore her. Stefan's phrases made me flip to him in surprise. I thought about slamming him, returned into the tree as I denied any humane emotions. However, as a substitute sighed, final silent, and looked head on as we walked lower back. I'd given him his answer. She loves you, he persisted. His phrases performed the beyond in my thoughts. Flashback. You were so stunning. Her huge brown eyes had been observing tenderly, with mine preserving me captive. The solar rays have been accepted with the opaque window glass, softly highlighting her creamy skin. The crimson in her mahogany hair turned into now revealed as she sat there on my mattress, in my shirt, her hair disarrayed and her lips swollen barely, which then parted in a toothy smile. Beautiful. And also you, Mr. Salvatore. Cheesy. She threw her head back in laughter at my mock glare. The sound changed into like bells ringing and almost childlike and innocent. I reached over and pulled her to me. She pressed her body onto mine, and I used to be right away and want again with my insatiable nature than most effective woke up in her presence. Handiest for you, Isabel, I whispered, pushing her hair far from her face and then cupping her face simplest to pull her down so our lips ought to meet. She rolled us over so I used to be on pinnacle and endured to kiss me sensually, licking my bottom lip, and that I moved all the way down to nip at her neck. I really like, she started, and I regarded up at her hopefully, my eyes questioning what I thought she might be saying. This she replied with a smile, but it in no way reached her eyes. End flashback. The reminiscence added so many conflicting emotions that I'd cross insane with some of these feelings I might saved buried, however, had been now awakening. I could move home. I ought to open but another bottle of scotch and drown my sorrows with my humanity switched off. However, I failed to need to. I wanted to feel the worry, the guilt, the fear, the regret, the ache, and the love. It changed into love that ruled those thoughts and reminiscences of my Isabel. I cherished her. Always have and always will. Ever in view that I set my eyes on her in her lovable nurse's outfit. I cherished how she saw beyond my bullshit and saw the good. I cherished how she depended on me. I cherished how she knew what to say to make me feel better even though I used to be a fucked up monster. I cherished how she'd long gone through all this hassle just for my birthday that turned into simply who she become. I loved her. I loved Isabel, and I would do everything to hold her in my eternity. I'd no longer lose her. Not again. No longer this time. SPOV. We got again to the boarding house, most effective to discover Bonnie changed into already sat on the dining table, but she paid no attention to us as she argued in whispers to Elena. Do not need to do this, Bonnie told her in harshened whispers. Elena regarded up from her catching sight if our arrival, so Bonnie became to observe us. I understand you do not need to do this and agree with me. If there was every other manner I wouldn't ask you. This aspect of Damon became barely creepy, however I preferred it despite the fact that I was tempted to make a few sarcastic statement however that might simply motive greater harm than proper, so I knew better than to rile him up. His hair changed into all messy as he'd been jogging his palms out of frustration. Despite the fact that his became tired, the tiredness became displaying on his face, making him look older. He'd aware of my brooding with the creases on his brow forming as he looked around the room. I recognize you don't want to do this. Damon stumbled forwards with a mild stammer in his steps. Going for walks, his fingers through his hair, he sighed and dropped his palms to his aspects. Please simply assist me locate her. And if I don't. Bonnie stood up. Her chin jutted defiantly as she stared him down. She can probably die, Damon growled. Then just like the madman he changed into performing like. He growled and grabbed at his hair fiercely, walked towards his alcohol, picked it as much as vicinity on his lips, but then tousled and threw the bottle far from him. It landed within the fire, making the blaze fiercer and the flames come to lifestyles. His entire frame shaking as he regarded far from all and sundry, breathing closely. Silence stuffed the room. Elena stared huge-eyed at his movements. Caroline changed into greatly surprised as turned into Bonnie. I but surely felt sorry for my brother. He should not go through this. Okay, Bonnie broke the uncomfortable silence. All of us became to her along with Damon, who dispatched a grateful nod to her. I'll need something personal that belongs to her in her picture. Her voice was croaky as even she shook, undermining the boldness she tried to uphold. Without a word, Damon rushed upstairs earlier than Bonnie had even completed. He got here lower back unexpectedly with an antique image dated 1887. It changed into Isabel in a long light blue floor period get dressed, a white and blue bonnet on her head protecting her piled up hair. Alongside that, he held in his other arm a silver necklace with an problematic design, likely her family crest. Right here he hurriedly located them at the desk and waited for the subsequent phase of the ritual. Bonnie went within the kitchen and back with candles. She then area herself at the chair on the dining table. Damon walked to the chair but then returned to pace the ground, sending wary glances at Bonnie, who changed into now reciting her native tongue, inflicting the candles to mild up. She positioned a palm over the necklace and it slowly lifted up. Her muttering grew louder. No longer simplest turned into the candle flame fiercer, so were the flames inside the fireplace. Elena gasped whilst the home windows flung open and the wind whooshed in, placing out the candle flames. Silence crammed the room and we watched as Bonnie slumped in her chair, manifestly worn out. Elena at once rushed to test if she was okay. The complete ordeal showed that we wouldn't be able to find her. Searching at Damon, I waited for his fury, however it by no means came as an alternative he genuinely regarded defeated, like the whole world had crashed down onto him. He'd given up, but then as he changed into turning for the door but stopped as Bonnie referred to as out. I realize in which she is. DPOV. While my feelings have been wayward nowadays, and although it might be less difficult to just switch off, I knew that I couldn't deliver myself to. After Bonnie informed us the instructions, I jumped in my beloved Mustang equipped to go away, however the others trailed in after me. As an awful lot as I desired to argue and provide a lecture, I knew that would take time, and each second we wasted become bringing Issa in the direction of loss of life. With a sigh, I pulled out of the driveway and accompanied Bonnie's commands. Happily it wasn't some distance from here. I extended the speed to the maximum now, not worrying about the dangers, however right now Issa was my essential priority. Rushing past the town, we had been now nearing Georgia. Why did she visit Georgia? No longer now. Excitement and worry mingled in me as I awaited the destiny that would be on the side of the street consistent with Bonnie. She didn't recognize if Issa turned into alive or not, so I failed to realize what I was going to. What's that? Caroline pointed ahead and we appeared forwards to a parked car. It changed into Issa as her stay away from Challenger veered off the road. Now, not understanding what I used to be doing, I acted on impulse, shut the engine off and hopped out of the car. Please be alive. Please be alive, I chanted again and again in my thoughts as I neared my destiny. I paused on the skid marks which indicated she swerved right into a stop. Respiratory heavily, I reached the auto, however nobody turned into in it. No person. Mind reeled in my mind and the excitement I'd felt turned into being dominated with the aid of the numbing worry. Issa, her call changed into a smooth breathe through my lips as I whipped my head around on the lookout for any clues. She's not here. Fuck. Wah how. The crazed lower back which turned into the cause why I struck my clenched fist onto the glass, causing it to penetrate through the window, shards if glass flew everywhere. And it felt suitable. One hit wasn't enough as I started out to punch into the metallic, causing the auto to groan in protest, but every hit it took changed into allowing my rage to flare. From the again of my thoughts, I heard the others draw in near to me. However, I used to be beyond worrying as I gave an annoyed growl before pushing the automobile, inflicting it to roll over the facet in a crash. Damon. Elena's scared voice halted my actions. Turning to stand her, I saw the panic-bothered expression it held as her eyes have been full of glistening tears. "We'll find her," she cried out to me, and I dropped my readied clenched fist. "How, Elena? How will we find her? She might be dead already. Inform me, how are we going to find her?" Last, the gap between us so our faces had been simplest inches apart. Cautiously, her fingers shook as she reached up, and I watched her movement in surprised whilst she located her warm palm onto my cheek. "We're going to discover her," she whispered, and that I may want to feel the sting in my eyes. "Hello guys," Caroline known as to us, and we snapped out of it to show to peer as she pointed to sighing on the other aid of the crashed vehicle. Pulling out of Elena's grasp, I ran round to look what Malibu vamp had stuck sight of. Freezing in my steps while seeing what she'd caught. A trail of blood mane further into the woods. Hurriedly, I driven my strength over the edge as I ran, following by way of the path. The worry back now as the smell of the blood grew stronger. Halting in my moves, my eyes paused to digest the scene unraveling earlier than me. Her dress become torn on the hem, and I found the motive to be wrapped around her wound, but it hadn't helped much. I also took be aware of the reality that she changed into barefoot. She regarded even paler than normal, almost ashen. Her eyelids had drooped, hiding away her beautiful brown eyes. Her hair became splayed all over the dampened earth, wet from the drizzle that had taken vicinity of the sun. My knees trembled with every step too close to her, and I succumbed to the weakness once I was by her facet, cradling her now cold frame to me, now not wanting to ever permit go. She couldn't be useless. She simply couldn't. I would not allow her leave me. I couldn't. Bonnie and Elena reached us after a few seconds, lapsing with the sight before them. She's not dead, snapping at their defeat. How may want to they give up so without difficulty? She wasn't dead. I rocked her, now not getting up from the moist earth. I did not want to move, not but. The rain grew heavier. Raindrops fell down onto us. Damon, Elena called to me, but I failed to observe her this time. I persevered to whisper to Isabel, ignoring what was around us. "Come," returned Issa. "Come, return to me." This persisted, however I paused whilst Elena's hand fell onto my shoulder. Turning to her, I noticed her eyes widen for a few unknown purpose. She had given up. Why had been they giving up? She wasn't dead. She wasn't long past. She hasn't left. Without a phrase, I stood up, Isabel still in my arms as I carried her bridal fashion towards the auto, my car. I'll have to buy her a brand new car. She'd love that kind of buying, chuckling at her hatred for purchasing despite the fact that she loved to look desirable. Ignoring the wary glances the others shared, I persevered beyond them and went towards the principal road. Vaguely, I should listen the shuffling of their feet grazing the leaves as they observed after us. "Damon," she whimpered in her extremely slumber. Snapping my eyes to her, I stuck sight of her eyes which locked with mine. Issa, an elated emotion burst in me and my denial transitioned into hope. To reply me, her eyes drooped yet again and her head definitely lolled to the aspect, so I attitude my fingers so as for her to relaxation it on my chest. My once slow stroll became now a run as my coronary heart soared with desire. BPOV. Static sound filled my mind, which was now a black canvas of darkness. Using all my strength, I tried to pry open my eyes, but it rendered to be useless, they were as heavy as lead. The static sound began to fade and replaced with an annoying mumbling. Someone was around me and I wanted to quench my curiosity, but there was no luck, with the sense of sight gone along with my sense of smell, making it very uncomfortable for me. I decided to rely on my hearing. The distant mumbling became louder, they were close to me. Slowly the sounds cleared up, as did my nose apparently, as I could detect the faint smell of blood nearby, and the hunger returned. So hungry. Snapping my eyes open, I searched for the source of this delicious smell. Ripping away from the surface I lay on, I looked around. My once blurry sight had cleared. Searching my surroundings, I was confused with where I was. How did I get here? Forget that anger. What is she doing here? Her eyes held fear, but I didn't care as I rushed over to her, my fingers gripping around her fragile little neck, pushing her onto the wall behind her. Came back for more, huh? Narrowing my eyes at her. She struggled to free herself, but I pushed her more into the wall, ignoring her pleas. Isabel, it's me, it's Elena, she pleaded, crying for my mercy. My sense tried to tell me she was right, but my body controlled my mid as it felt the hunger. Even better, my voice was of a predator, and I loosed my grip lightly, then felt as the veins popped under my eyes, hardening the skins, and my fangs extend as I moved in for the pulsing vein. Her feeble hands were weak as they hid my chest, trying to free herself. Sense and reasoning made me fight, so I hesitated for a second, and then I pushed myself to fight and let go of her. Ard clutching at my head, which felt as if it would explode. Sinking to my knees, I pulled at my hair. The heat returned to overwhelm me, and the hunger still screamed for attention. Run, Elena, begging for her to leave. Every fiber of my being wanted to chase after her. And that's what I did. She was running downstairs, so I jumped down to stand in front of her before she got down. Her eyes screamed for her life as she gasped, "He phone on her hand. I just want a little taste," inclining my head to look at her as I stalked towards her. My feet were slow with their movements as my predator instincts came to life. "Is please. You don't want to do this?" Her stuttering made me even more excited. I didn't feel like me, it was like I watching this scene unveil from a distance. Hunger, morality, anger, hunger, rage, heat was becoming suffocating. Anger urged me to punch the wall nearest to me. What was happening to me? All I could hear was the loud pulsing of her blood as it rushed around her body, and all I would think of was opening up her pretty little neck so I could drink her every drop. Another step forwards. She pressed her back onto the steps behind her, but I kept moving forward. Stop. My humanity tried, but I was past caring. The smell was so enticing and I was so hungry. Her neck was on display, taunting me, and I came closer, just one bite. This one her. Elena. Stefan burst through the door, Alaric next to him, and I watched as he shot at me with the wooden bullets. Taken by surprise, I was too slow to dodge, so I ended up on the floor, grateful to the pain that was inflicted onto the injured arm because it stopped me from hurting anyone. Sense broke through and I felt the control in my limbs. "Just kill me. Please do it. I don't want to hurt anymore," I cried in multiple sobs, my whole frame shaking. All I could feel was the mind-numbing pain stopping me from even thinking clearly. Issa Damon appeared from behind the two, ran over to me beside me. His eyes ran down my body, then stopped at my torso. He acted quickly, his fingers inside me as he pulled out the wooden bullets. He pulled another from my shoulder and then bit into his hand, placing the dripping blood to my lips, but I shook my head. I was going to hurt her, I wanted to hurt her. I don't no words finished that sentence as I looked up at him, hoping he'd understand. It was my time to go, and I would gladly incite death. "You can leave me." His eyes were red as he stares down at me. His arm moved closer to my lips, but I moved my head away from it. Next thing I knew, Damon gripped my head and forced the bleeding wound into my mouth. "Damo!" Stefan called from behind. "Don't you dare!" he threatened, his eyes remaining locked with mine. No life lighted his eyes, the mischief was gone, and no spark held his expression. There was no smirk, no sign of living. His complexion was more ashen, his eyes bloodshot as he stared down at me. Blood forcibly ran down my throat as I tried to struggle, but I was too weak. Once he saw I had enough, he pulled his arm away gently, and I gasped, coughing and splattering, but he just stayed there on his knees looking at me with a pained expression. "You can leave me," he croaked out. As much as I wanted to slap him, I reached out desperately to hold him to me. He angled my body so that he cradled me, his arms were tight around me. "I don't want to." Brief An was going to stop there, but thought this part would be important. BPOV. I was woken by a whisper of my name. Sitting up, I looked to my side and found Damon was laying there in a deep sleep. This was the only time he actually looked peaceful and like the Damon I knew. There were no creases on his forehead from frustrations, there was no smirk to hide his buried sadness. His chest rose and fell and he sighed in his slumber. I know I should be angry with him for forcing his blood in me, even with the fact that all it did was slightly stabilize me. The pain was still there in my arm, but it was dull. All he'd done was lengthen my short time on this earth. It was a fact. I was dying. Gently, I stroked his face, then pushed the strands of hair away from his face. He sighed again and I smiled as he places his arm around my waist. Suddenly, my ears perked up to the light footsteps that came from downstairs. Only a vampire would have been able to hear the soft tap on the wooden floor, yet it sounded vaguely familiar. Looking back at Damon, I stroked his face once more and then pulled my weight off the bed, straining the pained groan threatening to escape. Gently I pushed his arm away and began to quietly walk downstairs. Once I was out the door, the stairs seemed endless, and when permitting a small groan, I began to weakly take them one by one. Finally I landed on the bottom and looked from both sides but caught nothing out of the ordinary. Ugh, the irony! I remembered when I did this to Damon. Walking towards the kitchen, I outed when hearing the whoosh sound from behind me. "I can smell you, so why don't you just show yourself?" It came as a harsh whisper. It was true that I could sense the all too familiar scent, and a dread came over me as the shadowed visitor showed himself. As if things couldn't get more complicated. He just had to show up. Been too long he had the nerve to smirk at me. Before I'd been upset over his departure, but now all I wanted to do was slap him across the face. Not long enough sneering at him, but he shrugged it off. "What are you doing here, Elijah? Bet you all thought Edward he might make an appearance later on. Could ask you the same thing. Friend's birthday." His eyebrows rose up in question. "What about you?" He looked me in the eye, then dropped his eyes onto my arm. Scrunching up his face, I watched as the worry highlighted his creased forehead. "Seems you got a nasty little bite," he stated dryly, ignoring my previous question. "Nothing I can handle." The confidence I attempted to portray didn't work with my stammer. "Quite the opposite, young Isabel," he sighed softly, and great regret was held in his eyes. "This is something you cannot handle, and we both know what will happen." His words were weakening me further, if that was even possible. I wasn't even sure about the ending of that sentence. I was slightly glad and annoyed when he stopped me. "Werewolves. Filthy creatures." He stared me down, circling me. His words subdued my anger, changing my expression into a questioning look as I kept my eyes trained on him. "What do you know about werewolves?" Hitching an eyebrow with my head inclined when he stopped to look at me. "I know you shouldn't pet them," he smirked, making a small smile tug my lips, but I refrained. "Elijah, I have no idea why you here, and frankly I don't care." Trying to make an escape and hopefully stopping the others from waking up. From what I could recall, Elena was staying in Stefan's room. "Oh, but you should," he answered, bringing my attention back to him. "And why is that?" I knew it was only a matter of time before he revealed his conditions. "Because I have the cure," he answered, and I froze with his simple tone. He had the cure. He had the cure. Did I want the cure? Dizziness hit me and the pain in my arm throbbed as if in answer. I was tired of hurting. "What do you want for it?" Again, I knew Elijah too well to think he'd simply just hand over the cure. "First thing you should know about the originals, don't trust them. Although if I had to choose someone to trust, it would probably be Elijah." "How can you think so little of me?" he teased. "I know you too well." Shrugging my shoulders. In truth, I'd crossed his paths in France a while back. He'd been quite a gentleman then, don't get me wrong. He isn't the worst vampire you'd come across, but he used to be really humble. Wouldn't have asked for anything in return. A real gentleman. What's the condition? Squaring my shoulders, even though the wave of pain that hit me was intense enough to make me wince. He gave me a calculating stare for a few moments before stretching out his palm towards me. "Take a walk with me," he offered, waiting for my confirmation. I stood there looking at him, then flickering to his palm. Upstairs I heard the sound of the sheets shifting and the bed creaking slightly before hearing the deep breathing belonging to Damon fill the atmosphere again. I knew the answer. He was my answer. Without another thought, I placed my life in Elijah's hand. DPOV. When opening my eyes, the light blinded my eyes from the window. Sounds of annoyingly cheerful chirps of the birds penetrated through the window to disturb me. Stretching my arms, I sat up, running a lazy hand through my hair and then rubbing my eyes. "Isabel." Snapping my head to the side, confusion set in as I caught only an empty bed. There were no sounds of life around the house, just complete silence. Ripping away from the tangled sheets, I ran downstairs frantic with overbearing worry. Isabel, Isa, running into the parlor. I found nothing unless you considered the scattered beer bottles along with other bits of rubbish something. We'd never gotten round to cleaning up after compelling the party-goers to leave. Kitchen. Nothing. Bathroom. Nothing. Then I realized something. Stefan and Elena weren't here either. Elena. Stefan. My emotions and thoughts were fastidiously racing through my mind. Too fast for me to even make sense of them. Grabbing the keys, I rushed out of the door but stopped with what I found. Isabel. Reason for my surprise and relief was seeing her once shaking frame now stood tall and proud like before but looking even stronger. Wet strands of her lifeless hair had returned to her wavy brown locks that had a mind of its own. Her once ashen-looking skin was back with its limited color but added with an extra glow. Her dull brown eyes had lost the pain replaced with vibrant life. She was dressed in a white sundered with a short-sleeved denim jeans jacket on top with gladiator sandals. Sunglasses placed lightly on the top of her head. My eyes flickered to her wounded arm but found nothing. The purple swelling was no longer there. It was gone, all of it gone. It was like it was never there. How? All she did was smirk at my disbelieving tone. Oh, and how gorgeous she looked. It seemed she looked even more amazing now, if that was even possible. You look amazing, gasping out the very necessary words. How this happened? Was it the blood I gave her? It couldn't be that, wouldn't be enough to heal her wound. Nothing a nice shower can do. I didn't really realize how much I'd missed her voice. The bell C element her octaves held to show how happy she was. How? Closing our unneeded distance, I was close enough to stroke her face. She was here. This wasn't a dream. Her warm temperature told me she was here. Let's not think about my face instantly fell with her words diversion as she began to sidetrack me, but this time it wouldn't work. Don't do that, scolding her attempts in passing this off. Grabbing her hands in mine, I held a tight grip but not too tight to hurt her. How did this happen? My eyes bored into hers and she sighed. You're so stubborn. She ruffled my hair and I chuckled. Take after you, snarling smugly at her. Her nose scrunched up, her eyebrows furrowing, in the most adorable way. Back to matters at hand. How did all this happen? I still sounded incredulous. I reveled in how her breathing was calm and collected rather than heavy and jarred as it was before. I know people, she answered, conspicuous, and then pulled away from me with a skip in her step. Before she walked away, I grabbed her hand to stop her. Isa, she cautiously turned to me, her eyes widening with what she caught on my face. I was worried. I thought you were going to die and I came for you. The least you could do is tell me whose ass I have to kiss for what they've done. My rambling got to her as she fully turned to face me, relenting with slumping shoulders, and then reached to cup my cheek. Let's walk. She locked her hand around Brian and I walked without another thought. I couldn't let her out of my sight for a minute anyway. We started off in a comfortable silence, simply taking in the fact that we were together. In 1897, I was in France for a while. That was the year, remembering her departure. The day I'd questioned for the majority of my existence. Why she'd left. Why she'd just packed up without a note. She nodded passively, so I knew better than to ask questions now. It was around mid-September and I was attending a ball, and that was when I crossed paths with an original. Her voice had dulled as she continued with the story. Original. Interrupting her again. Yeah. First vampires ever. His name was Elijah. He was a real charmer then. Still, as she reminisced with a wistful look on her face, causing me to have to bite back the growl that rippled in my chest. He knew what I was and wanted some help. Her teeth then sought to gnaw at her bottom lip, a nervous look in her eyes. Momentarily I was distracted from the current conversation as I watched her hidden innocence come out. Gently I used my fingers to pull it away but paused to enjoy the feeling of her soft, and she started at me as I asked what did he want. In response, her brown eyes widened, and if I wasn't imagining it, she leaned in closer to me. He wanted me to help him find someone. She was deliberately being vague with her answers. Someone. Hoping she'd elaborate. With an exhausted sigh, she looked me in the eye and with a stern voice she answered. He wanted to find a doppelganger. I saw as she neared her teeth to her bottom lips again, but when I sent a warning look she dropped it. Like Elena, she nodded somberly in reply. Why does he need a doppelganger? As I scrunched up my face in confusion, Issa returned the favor by pushing away my frown lines softly with her fingertips. Tingled burnt my skin from her sensitive touch. It's all part of the moonstone curse, she answered. How can everyone go through so much trouble for a rock? He wants to break it. My voice sounded so sure, but I knew she caught on to the hidden question between the lines. Not exactly, she mirrored my calculating expression before clarifying. He just wants to use the doppelganger to lure someone out. Who? Reason why I was asking was because I knew about originals. I knew they could kill me easily. Having the upper hand would maybe help later. His brother Klaus. She seemed hesitant in answering, and a fear flashed in his eyes before deflating as she gave a weak smile. Wait a minute, Isabel had gotten the cure from this Elijah dude. That meant there was some deal that went on. There had to be, and if this guy was after a doppelganger. What deal did you make with him? I sounded stern with my question, and she seemed taken back as she took a stumbled step away from me with a questioning look. Obviously you don't know me that well to think that I'd sell Elena out. She wavered slightly, and I instantly felt guilty for making the unnecessary assumptions. Of course I should know better than to think Issa would sell us out. My thoughts were halted when seeing her turn around to make a run for it, but I was quick when catching her arm. Now I had her, I would not let her go. I am sorry, filling my words with as much sincere apology I could. Her head was facing away from me, falling down so her hair curtained her features. She turned to me after a few seconds of silence, her eyes searching mine, then she sighed to turn to me. Does being a jackass come naturally to you? She smirked, allowing me the relief to know she'd forgiven me. It takes skill, shrugging with a mirrored smirk. She then continued with her information. He just wanted me to do a spell. Her vagueness returned. What kind of spell? The kind that helps him find Klaus' location. She crossed her arms, walking beside me towards God knows where, but I trusted her as we walked further into the crowded trees. Did it work? I already knew the answer to that question. If it hadn't, she wouldn't be here. When Issa gave her word, she stuck to it, and I knew her reasons for helping Elijah would be legit. I trusted Isabel. I trusted her with my life. Yep. Found out he's in Rome. Her smugness made me smile. We both knew how powerful she was without her bragging. I am so glad you okay. The words tumbled out of my mouths without my mind's consent, but I didn't mind. I am too. She stepped into my arms and held me tightly, fisting her hands in the back of my shirt. She then pulled away to look up at me in question. So can we get over the whole miracle recover because we almost there? Her words sparked up my curiosity, and I looked around the forest but found nothing out of the ordinary. Where? What did she mean we were here? With another secretive smile, she snapped her fingers and a pathway was revealed as the bushes ahead parted. Come on, she encouraged me, her arm looped around mine to pull me along with her. If this is the part where you kill me and leave my body in the woods, I trailed off, jokingly making her laugh, the light bell C tone exciting me again. Here we are, she announced, but I couldn't see anything. We had traveled deeper into this bush and were now in an opening clearing. It seemed closed off from the world, away from the hectic lives of everyone, and it dawned on me why we were here. Happy birthday, she whispered, moving in closer to me after giving me time to take in the surroundings. Before I could thank her, I watched mesmerized as her palm waved above us and the towering trees above us gave way of the clear blue sky, permitting some sunlight to fall into the secluded part we were in. I still think you deserve one day clear of stress. She began to bite her lip again, waiting for my approval. Is it a little presumptuous to think it was me that you'd want to spend it with? She asked, clear of jokes. I knew she wanted a serious answer. Stalking towards her, I quickly wrapped her in a hug when she was in my reach. Then I pushed back to look at her, pushing her hair back. Her head rested in my hands. I wouldn't want to be with anyone else. A wide smile played on her lips with my answer, and her eyes twinkled with life. Me neither, she grinned, then placed a light kiss on my cheek. The tingle from before traced where her soft plump lips had lingered. She froze, not moving away from me, so her hot breath warmed my neck. Her whole body was pressed up against mine, and the smell of strawberries and freesia filled my senses, getting me sidetracked as I reveled in the delicious smell. A buried nostalgic feeling had indulged in me. She looked up at me under her eyelashes. The afternoon sun rays highlighted her beautiful features. How her supple pink lips tempted me, and that's what made me snap. My arms went to wrap themselves tightly around her waist, and she clung to my chest even though her expression showed her uncertainty. Giving her my well-known dangerous smirk while my fingers caressed her cheek, My index finger went under her chin to tilt her up slowly nearing my lips. Doubt filled me so I hesitated for a second, simply basking in the feel as her nose brushed mine lightly. The warmth of her breath escaped her parted lips and I continued to stare at her brown eyes filled with an in-depth emotion. "Must I do everything?" she asked, sounding coldly before her fingers wrapped around the back of my head and she pulled me down to connect with her impatient lips. Having her lips on mine created a new feeling that I knew could never be reversed. I would scrutinize this new emotion later, but as for now, I would revel in how her hot breath seeped into mine as I took in her lips. Our bodies were already pressed up against each other, but she drove me even crazier as her teeth nipped at my bottom lip lightly, then she slid her tongue over it, causing me to beg for entrance. She willingly allowed me to sensually bring our tongues together in a heated kiss. This time it was different. It wasn't us searching for a distraction from our lost loves. It wasn't us wanting to feel loved. It was just us, together. Pulling away from my lips, I moved my lips down to her neck and began to suck hard at the soft exposed skin. She moaned, her fingers moved wildly in my hair, but then before I could stop her she hesitantly pulled away from my lips. Pause for a sec, she breathed heavily, her palm rested on my chest as she looked down at our now joined hands. She then looked up at me, her eyes heavy with lust that she seemed to hold back, her lips swollen from my ravaging, and a huge hickey was formed on her neck marking her as mine. "You are a teasing cockblocker," chuckling at her guilty expression. One question she breathed, and after a few moments of silence, it seemed that she braved up to ask her question. "Why did you stop me from killing Catherine? Isn't that what you wanted?" she asked. Her eyes searched mine, holding a certain desperation as she seeked for an answer. What should I tell her? Why had I stopped her? Remembering that night, I recall the feeling of panic when seeing Isabel knock down Catherine and fear when she held the snapped branch close to her chest, and I could remember how I acted on that fear without thinking to push her out of the way. I don't know, I found myself answering truthfully. I really wasn't sure why I had stopped her. You love her, she concluded. Pain strained her eyes as she cupped my face. I began to shake my head in denial from her words, but she stopped me with her words, and I understand that she sighed, falling back onto my chest. Then she continued, "Let's just relax." We spent the rest of the night laying under the stars in comfortable silence whilst soothing music from her iPod played. Through our time together, I thought about Catherine and tried to figure out how I could get over her and move on from what she was making me to be. I knew I loved Catherine, but I also knew I loved Isabel. Love. BPOV. After spending the entire day in our secluded forest, we had returned again to the boarding residence around 10:00, handiest to find a demanding-looking bunch. Stefan, Elena, Bonnie and Caroline have been all there, furrowed brows as they have been full of fear. Upon seeing us enter, their heads snapped up to us and moved to mine with disbelief coloring their faces. Caroline had been the primary to talk. "You are alive." Bonnie sounded surprised with this facts. Stefan and Elena remained on silence, probable due to the fact Bonnie and Caroline had stated what needed to be stated. "I am alive," skipping over to them. How do you feel?" Stefan requested. They all rushed over to me to hug me and take a look at me, nonetheless cautious and uncertain of my health. "Do not suffocate the girl." "I simplest were given her," returned Damon, nevertheless stood at the entrance but started to make his way over to us with a smirk. Strands of hair fell over his face as he bowed his head towards us. "I am so satisfied you okay." Elena smiled gleefully, her hand positioned in my shoulder. It changed into comforting to recognize I had girlfriends that cared approximately me and had been involved. I might died. Sure, been uncertain approximately her before everything, however I may want to see she cherished Stefan and that become accurate enough in my books, although I could not ignore the glances she been sending Damon, however, whilst remembering the earth-shattering kiss he given me inside the woods calmed me. How are you right here?" Stefan requested, dubious with curiosity. I recognize human beings hoping he get the trace and drop it. It turned into offending sufficient that Damon thought I was going to hand Elena over if Stefan heard the tale. He pinned me towards the wall, stake in his hand. Lamentably Stefan going to begin his interrogation, however thankfully Damon stopped him. "You realize it's been a protracted day." He faked a yawn, then walked over to wrap a protective arm over me. A powerful surge of affection washed over me together with his simplest of touches. "We are gonna head up to Mattress," Damon exclaimed, and that I nodded in confirmation. I need to get home anyway, Bonnie said, selecting up her satchel and shrugging it over her shoulder with a small smile directed at me. Yeah, me too, Caroline piped up. Elena, do you want a ride? No, I am gonna stay right here tonight, she spoke back, and I suppose she failed to understand she become doing it, but she became leaning toward Stefan. Okay then. Night men, Bonnie waved to us, making her way in the direction of the door, Caroline intently behind her as she observed with a pass in her step. I am tired, I sighed, falling lower back onto Damon's muscled chest. His fingers went to wrap round my body, and that I felt his nose sniff my hair earlier than he sighed in contentment. The gesture made me get away in a smile which almost dropped once I caught Elena's scrutinizing stare directed at wherein Damon's arms were. Permit us get to mattress, Damon smirked in my hair. I ought to hear the entertainment in his voice, to which I rolled my eyes. Good night, guys, I waved to them in goodbye and heard their light goodbyes. We started to stroll up the stairs and bowled a look on the couple. I smiled whilst seeing the two of them in a heated kiss. Once we had been in Damon's room, he pulled off his blouse, then tossed it across the rooms while he grew to become to me, ruffling his hair. My eyes zoned into his naked muscled torso and his dark denims that hung low, making him appear to be a model stepping out of a sexy cologne advert. He caught my obvious staring and smirked at me. Yeah, I recognize I am warm, he replied cockily, so I shook my head at him, but then a concept popped in my mind. Removing my jacket, I threw it with specifics so it landed on pinnacle of the closet door, then teasing Damon, I slipped off the straps of my dress with a hitched brow. His breath caught in his throat, and that I knew I had him where I desired. Doing my satisfactory oops face, I permit my arms drop and the loose get dressed fell to the ground to make a pool at my toes. His jaw fell while seeing me inside the black lace bra with the matching underwear. His eyes gaped, ingesting in my sight. For introduced degree, I ran a free hand in my hair, then shook a little, making it slightly wilder. Yeah, I understand I am hot, my smirk matched his from earlier then. His hooded gaze erupted the unintended lust, and that I licked my lips hungrily as he stalked toward me, claiming my lips as he pulled my 1-2 naked frame to his bare chest. The feeling of skin on skin become even more awesome than I should do not forget. His kiss turned into just like the one from earlier then, but delivered with a buried starvation. His tongue lashed out to explore my mouth eagerly, and that I could not help however soften in his include with a moan. His palms traveled down to cup my ass, and without a 2D idea, I floor myself onto him, feeling his constructing erection. My mind informed me to prevent this wasn't correct for him. It might create extra conflicting feelings. I suggest, who does he love in reality? Catherine, Elena, or me? I compelled my hands to vicinity themselves on his boulder and to ignore how he was making me ignite definitely by his lips. Using each piece of electricity I had, I pushed him to the other aspect of the wall with a crash. We continued while his face fell. Guilt crashed onto me, so I shook my head. I need to, searching down at his very tempting attractive frame, I groaned, biting my lip, which made him smile. Trust me, I need to, however, Jay, just now, not now. Gratefully he nodded in expertise, however the mischief colored in his eyes as he whispered. Later then, pretending I did not hear him, I picked up one in every of his shirts and walked past him and into his toilet, however before remaining it completely, I answered with a grin. Later. 4 hours later, Damon's bed. Groggily, I rolled over the bed, my hands searching, however now not locating. Snapping my eyes open, I sat up with unhappiness and fear while finding the space subsequent to me. Wherein became H. My questions have been halted when I heard shuffling of toes. A smile graced my lips with an concept of looking to scare him. I rapidly pulled out of the bed, cautious no longer to make a sound that could give me away, and to ran silently region myself subsequent to the door to see out of the crack. Everything fell down onto me as I watched the scene unfold. Oh God. Damon. Elena. Damon and Elena, her fingers wrapped around his waist similar to mine had a few hours ago. Her lips had been on his just like mine had been. The life that were in my coronary heart only a few hours in the past became drained as I stared with disbelief. I felt IIF. I felt nothing. I did what I did, high quality. I ran. DPOV. Having Issa subsequent to me, napping soundly became gratifying. Her gentle waves splayed out on the pillow, and I discovered myself gambling with the ends of her mahogany locks. Her lips were parted as she took in deep breaths, inflicting a rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. She became really enthralling. I continued watching her for some greater minutes whilst a stupid burn ignited in my throat, reminding me that I hadn't drank anything in a while, so I dropped a kiss on her forehead before grudgingly rolling off the bed. My naked feet landed casually at the timber floorboards as I shuffled out of the room, not wanting to wake her. Slipping out of the room, I closed the door slightly, leaving a small area as I remembered the press of the door final changed into pretty loud in the silence. As I grew to become round, I paused whilst catching Elena also coming out of her room. She changed into in her blue pajama shorts and white tank pinnacle. Momentarily I recalled how Issa was once more wearing my blouse for mattress. The thought made me smirk before regaining my interest and diverting it to Elena. "What you doing up?" Simply desired to get a drink. She held up the glass she had already prepared in her hand. I forgot that I used to be the only brother with the non-public rest room. Damon 1, Stefan 0. "What approximately you?" she requested curiously. Me too, flashing my tooth to feature excellent degree. She rolled her eyes, but then a critical look on her face as she thought hard. Approximately something. Her and my brother were a lot alike, each brewed on a day-by-day foundation. Thanks, remembering my gratitude toward her. For what? She seemed stressed by way of my sudden gratefulness. Taking walks closer to her, I appeared her inside the eyes so she knew what I was pronouncing become the fact. For not letting me give up on Isabel, I replied. The nook of lips became upward in a small smile. She again it with a small smile herself and breathed out. "You are welcome," she sighed and continued to stare up at me. Her lapis lazuli eyes bored into mine with a conflicting emotion. She breathed out through her parted lips, after which her tongue darted out to wetten her bottom lip. After a few minutes' awkward silence, I opened my mouth to bid a farewell, but before I should forestall her, Elena's lips crashed onto mine and that I stood there frozen till the concept fleeted my mind. The concept of thrashing Stefan at something clicked into mind, and I found myself kissing her again forcefully with the brand new piece of revelation. Her hands moved round me and the arrogant voice in my head dominated, telling me that I terrible received. She had selected me. It had continually been Stefan. It became continually Stefan. I might even notion Isabel Wool Isabel. The name by myself becomes sufficient to launch the crushing guilt and betrayal onto me, giving me the experience to push Elena away. She started out, however, then slapped to surrender her mouth, realizing what had simply came about. Silent tears glazed her eyes as she stated, horrified at me with what she'd just carried out. I started to mention what turned into likely on her mind. She let loose a strangled sob, then without a word, her horror face became far away from me as she returned to Stefan's room. Sliding down the wall behind me, I slumped there on the ground and my arms wound themselves in my hair. Unexpectedly I wasn't so hungry anymore. What had I finished? Walking back to the room, I slammed the door behind me and rested my again onto the door as I swallowed the strained sobs. What turned into I doing? What become I wondering? His personal brother, Elena. Stefan's vice startled me from my sobs, which had been becoming extra energetic. I tried to forestall, however it grew worse as I watched his shadow determine rise from the mattress and get in touch with my name worriedly, Elena. He rushed over to me and began to wrap his palms around me, but I shook my head now, not trying him to preserve me, which could build onto the overbearing guilt. What can I do? He sounded at the brink of tears with desperation to understand. The apology couldn't be spoken out loud as it require confessing to what I would performed. I just couldn't have a look at Stefan's face when telling him that I would kissed his brother. It wasn't the fact that Damon kissed me and I kissed him returned, it changed into the truth that I had been the one to kiss him. What's incorrect? He asked. Worry changed into in his voice at the sight of fear. Looking up at him via the distorted sight due to the tears, I saw his creased face reflecting his fear. I had to inform him it wouldn't be fair to him. It'd also be worse if he observed out a few other manner. While opening my mouth to inform him the reality, I used to be interrupted with Damon's loud growl. Fuck, he swore loudly, observed by numerous crashes. I stared extensive-eyed at Stefan, who became additionally shocked as he quickly walked beyond me to move take a look at on his brother. Despite the fact that they not act find it irresistible every now and then, Stefan and Damon cherished each different, but I might also have simply ruined their bond even greater. Much like Catherine did. Clicking thoughts into equipment, I ran after Stefan, who long gone into Damon's room. The door became cracked open and I could see the clattered mess he dethroned the whole thing he ought to get his palms on. The mattress become toppled over as have been his 3 big bookcases so that the priceless e-book series was scattered all around the room. Glasses were shattered, the shards all around the mess, but what I honestly noticed turned into that Isabel wasn't there. Oh no, I should feel the sobs returning as they racked my body, inflicting me to shake within the new revelation. What is incorrect? I heard Stefan ask Damon, and I driven the door cautiously, trying to step in her. Oh God, he become going to find out, he become going to hate me. It is all her fault, Damon tangled up loudly, after which turned, catching my sight on the door. He stomped his manner toward me, and for as soon as I felt truly scared of Damon. His featured have been distorted into the maximum frightening grimace, the face of a monster. Anger blared in his eyes, and it was directed at me. The veins appeared more potent below his eyes and his lips were curled into a snarl. It's your fault. You probably did this, he barked at me, inflicting me to stumble again, even as letting the tears in my disgrace. Stefan moved in the front of me to defend me from Damon's fury, however I desired to push him out of the way. They shouldn't combat over me. Depart her alone, Damon. Him protecting me made me sense even guiltier as I clutched to the back of Stefan's blouse. I leave her alone. She should depart me alone. His complete body shook as he glared at me over Stefan's shoulder. Wait, in which Isabel? Damon's rage grew with the reminder, and we watched as he punched into the wall, then fisted his bands into his hair as he paced the ground, muttering something in a different language. What is going on? Stefan requested in confusion, searching at me for an explanation. I had to inform him. It'd be worse if it was Damon that told him. He was going to hate me so much, however I brought this upon myself. Respiration deeply, I seemed up into his worried eyes and knew he didn't deserve this. Slumping my shoulders, I looked at Thefthound in fear of meeting his eyes and looking forward to the aftershake of the sobs to die down earlier than whispering low sufficient for the phrases to come out but loud sufficient for him to hear. I kissed Damon. BPOV. What is love? A feeling, a thought, a belief, a myth. I really don't care what it is, I just don't believe in it like I used to. I remember as a kid how I'd watched my parents argue over every single insignificant thing. How one word could set off the other person. Love is a lie. All that crap about falling for someone when really all you do is fall. What is the point of falling for someone when they're not ready to catch you? The rain continued to pelt down onto me, waving as I weaves in and out of the trees in attempt to get as far from him as I could, although even if I ran away from him, I couldn't escape the thoughts that followed. Why had he done this? Why had I come back? Better yet, why did I let myself live? If I knew he would make me feel this way, I would have declined Elijah's offer. Breathing had become an exercise as I pushed past the trees, my nails scratching off the bark. Air left my lungs, straining my muscles from the lack of oxygen, and it became harder to push myself to run further before he caught me. It felt like such a slap in the face because I'd shown him my secret spot in the forest, and now I just don't know. What was wrong with him? Or better yet, what was wrong with me? I was never enough. Not for anyone. My anger was mixed into the witch's spirits. I could feel their fury magnify mine, which was why I could feel the energy source of my powers affect my control. Wind grew louder and the rain grew more furious. Lightning began to struck down onto the forest, but I knew I was gone too far to even attempt reining myself in. Angrily, I pushed down the nearby tree. My assault caused it to groan in protest before falling down. The sadistic side of me was released with enjoyment from wrecking something, which was why instead of dodging the trees I began to go through them. The crushed bark tickled my skin slightly and I got off from the crunch-like noise that erupted from my rage. Stop, a voice whispered as I halted my movements. My eyes widened when I heard the loud rustle of the leaves around me. Stop, Isabel. The voice was familiar, but as I searched the clearing I found nothing out of the ordinary. It then hit me who was speaking. Emily, whispering to the darkness. The leaves shivered in answer and it quirks up my lips slightly to her looking out for me. What am I gonna do? Sighing as I slumped down to the dampened ground by ignoring how the mud dirtied my bare legs. It made me realize I was still in Damon's shirt, and this angered, which was why I ripped it off me as if it had burnt my skin, leaving me in my bra and pajama shorts. I felt so cold. ELPOV. Silence. Silence was all that filled the room after I'd made my revelation. Stefan looked frozen on the spot and I waited for a reaction, any reaction, but he remained in his place. "We should look for Isabel," was the first words he said. Jealousy was ignited with his words, but I pushed past it. Why was he acting like this? Ignoring what I just said. "Stefan." My fingers reached for his arm, but I froze when he shook away from my touch. Damon's eyes widened with Stefan's action but then narrowed when catching my gaze. "I'll check the grill," he told Damon, directly ignoring my presence. Stefan, we have to." My arms reached out again for him, but he stumbled back and turned to look at Damon. "Isabel is missing." His eyes held concealed pain, but he fought it back as he turned around, ignoring my calls for his return. Damon passed me swiftly and followed his brother, leaving me alone with my threatening thoughts. BPOV. After finally pulling myself together after a pep talk, I got up from the ground and ran back where I came from, heading towards the town. I'd come to the conclusion that I wouldn't run away. I was many things, but I was not a coward. The witches may have guided me for a reason, and I knew the reason was Elena. As much as the hatred fueled my anger directed towards her, I would keep her safe. This was my purpose, to be here. The only purpose. Nothing else would deter me from my mission, or should I say no one else. I'd try and keep my distance from them and do my job. I'd always questioned why I didn't die after Klaus snapping my neck after forcing his blood on me. Yes, Klaus had been the one to change me. Thought I'd died too, but here I was. I am supposed to be some imbalance of nature, and I should have died. Klaus thought I was dead. I knew why he'd done it. He's the type of person that wants to always be on top of the ball. Wants to know what goes on and doesn't like it when people get in his way or deny his wishes, like I had. Would be a great shock when he set his eyes on me. Soon. As for now, all I needed to think about was getting some blood in my system along with clothes, but I knew I couldn't go back there. I'd also need a temporary place to stay, somewhere inconspicuous like a hotel or something. Finally I rounded the corner that opened up to the main road. Looking at both sides, something white caught my eye. Few yards away, oh no, my car. Running towards it, I found it was toppled over, the windows were smashed and shards of glass scattered underneath my beauty. My gorgeous Dodger Challenger. Subconsciously, I stroked Ree's sides and with a flick of my finger, turned it the right way round. It was already dead and there was nothing I could do. Repairs would probably cost more than the car would. What upset me was the fact if saved up for the car instead of simply compelling the sales guy, and now look what happened. It had symbolized achievement and hard work, all from working at the Newton sportswear shop. TW thought made me miss Forks. It may not be perfect, but it had a slightly homely feel, not as much as Mystic Falls, but it was there. I kinda missed the man I'd compelled to be Father Charlie. He was an ancestor, so it seemed to make sense. Charlie had been quite wonderful in his true nature. I'd just compelled him to think I was his daughter, but his love came naturally. I missed him. Slipping into the car, I rummaged through the dashboard and found my iPod and my purse and attempted to not wince at the scratches on the Italian leather seats. Moving back out of the car, I checked the trunk and found my other duffel. Inside were a few essentials, so with a grateful sigh, I grabbed the black tee, gray acid-washed jeans and a jeans jacket. Thankfully a brush was in there, so I walked back to sit in the front seat as I changed, not wanting to risk any passing frat boys that might catch me in my inappropriate state. Pulling on the clothes, in a haste, I ran the brush through my already wet hair, trying to get rid of the frustrating knots. Once I decided I looked close to presentable, I jumped out and closed the door gently, not wanting to ruin it further. Then I walked back to the trunk and pulled out the duffel bag, slinging it over my shoulder when throwing the hairbrush in there. With one last longing look at my car, I sighed in defeat. Could this day get any worse? "See y'all later, buddy." I patted the exterior softly and began a slow, purposeful pace back towards my shit-complicated life. Me and Stefan had ran out of the house, leaving Elena behind us. Once we were out in the heavy rain, he then began to run, but seeing as my switch was off, I felt the crushing guilt for what I'd done, which was why I chased after him. "Keep up, brother," he joked, but I could hear how off his voice sounded. He kept his eyes forward, but I saw him cast a glance at me from the corner of my eye, but then the tension grew so thick it seemed to choke me, which was why I finally apologized. "I am sorry. I really miss having the switch off." Stefan skidded to stop, as did I, looking back at him. He stared at me with his brooding expression before scoffing. For what, Damon? You redoing exactly what you said you'd do, he said, crossing his arms over his chest with an amused expression, but his eyes told me otherwise. What d? Stefan interrupted me. You'll spend the rest of my existence ruining my life, Damon. Well, congratulations. His words contrasted with the ironic glare he sent my way. Stefan, I didn't kiss Elena. She kissed me, trying to defend myself. For some reason, I felt worse and wanted to crawl back home and drink, but I stayed where I was. So what? You've been in love with her and you haven't exactly hidden that fact, he snarled at me. He began to walk past him, but I held his arm to stop him. In return, he broke a branch and dug it through my stomach, then twisted in, making the pain more intense. It felt like a fiery burn spread through my stomach, and I doubled over in pain, crumpling over the ground, then pulled it out of my stomach, spluttering from the impact. Fuck you, Damon, he spat, and then I heard his footsteps fade as he ran away, while I remained in the rain with all the conflicting emotions that I'd tried to bury away for so many years that I'd even forgotten what real emotions were, like guilt, fear, worry for someone else, and love. BPOV. Dawn was breaking in as I neared Mystic Falls. For a few moments of walking, the smell of fresh coffee hit me, and due to still being quite far from civilization due to my slow pace, I was curious and followed the smell into the forest. The scent led to a large cottage, smoke blowing out of the chimney. A distant humming came from the house, but what caught my attention was the sign that read room to rent, and decision was made to stay here for a while. It looked okayish, slightly weird to be so far out, but I'd be content. Although it was slightly far from the main town and had easy access to the main road, so I was okay. It sat at the edge of the forest but was slightly covered with the forestry. Anxiously, I knocked on the door with 3 light raps and was surprised to find an elderly woman open with a smile. I'd thought the owner would be asleep. Hello dear, her voice was a light coo which made me smile. Can I help you? She continued. She was quite pretty. Her gray hair was tied into a messy bun, and her purple eyes held nothing but warmth, and her older face held years of wisdom and experience. She was dressed in a pale blue flower-patterned dress with a red apron on top. There was a certain significant smell coming from her. It smelt familiar but rare, like a herb of some sort. Hi. I saw your sign, hoping she'd catch on to what I was implying at. Oh, you want to rent a room? Her cheek flushed with excitement from my offer, and he clapped his hands in joy. Yeah, my uncertain shyness came naturally from my long role of being innocent human Bella. She clapped her hands again, then wiped them on her apron, then surprisingly wrapped an arm over my shoulder to pull me in, but I paused as it hadn't been a proper invitation. She looked at me with an expectant look, then inclined her head, still scrutinizing me. With a final thought, she stepped back and told me, "You may come in." There was something about her that made me feel suspicious. Something was nagging at the back of my head with her strange behavior. Thanks, I sighed, still keeping my cover in case I was just being paranoid. Slowly, I stepped inside cautiously, then gave her a gleaming smile when I was sure she wouldn't be catching me out or trying to kill me. Reaching out my hand, I introduced myself in hopes I could get a reading from her. "I am Isabel." Gently, her palm wrapped around me, and I waited for the truth about her. But I got no reading. No flashes, no visions, no feelings. Now I was worried. "Pleased to meet you. I am Mrs. Flowers." She gave a toothy grin, then patted her hair, which caused me to get rid of my skeptic look, replacing it with a masked smile to hide my suspicion. My instincts were conflicting concerning her. Something told me she had a secret, but something else told me to trust her. "Nice to meet you," giving a gentle smile. I felt so tired emotionally and would love to collapse on the bed to drift of to problem-free world that was my dream. I actually used to live in this house with my husband until he died. Het trailed off wistfully, and I watched as the warmth from her eyes hardened with her buried pain. Gently, I placed a comforting arm on her arm. "I am sorry," apologizing politely for her loss. She turned to me with a grateful expression. "Thank you, dear," she smiled, then straightened her back, then caught sight of my sympathetic look. "Oh, look at me, I should be looking after you," she flustered. Her cheeks flushed and the sparkle in her eyes returned, as well as the excitement. "How about I show you the room?" she asked, and I nodded, then followed after her as she headed upstairs. We passed various pictures of her and her husband, and the next one was a picture of her with another elderly woman who had her arm around her. They were both smiling widely to the camera, looking extremely happy. "It get lonely around here," I am just glad there's another girl around. She was a very vibrant character. So brave and so strong for moving on with life after her husband died. You knew in town. Her question threw me off. Kinda, I answered, not sure how I could answer. She nodded and I was happy she hadn't prodded asking for questions. Finally we got to the landing and I found instead of photographs there were various paintings. One of the seaside, another of a vase of flowers and another was of the countryside. Pausing, I stepped closer to investigate the beauty of the painting. My fingers traced the green grass paints and I smiled from the purposeful rough texture. Finished that one yesterday, she said from behind me. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. You did this? Sounding bewildered but impressed, she nodded and then smiled. This is your room. She pointed to the room next to the painting and then moved to push it open for me to get a look. It was very flowery, too flowery for my taste, and the walls were a bright blue which let the sun hit it perfectly. On the bed there were flower-patterned beddings. Next to it was a beige wooden desk with a small chair next to it. On the far corner was a bookshelf and I found it perfect. I needed some light in my life. This is perfect. Turning to give her a reassuring smile. Her fallen face rose again with my genuine words. It's really what I need right now. The last part was to myself but it was clear enough for her to hear it too. Is there anything you need to know? I asked, remembering she should know some things about me. She wiped her hands on her apron in a somewhat nervous gesture. Why don't you put your bags down and we have a drink? Her smile was back and then with a curt nod, she fleeted out of the room. Once she left the room, I sat my duffel bag down and then slumped down to the bed. My body sank on my bed. Placing my hands on the edge, I looked around and gave a defeated sigh. Guess this was me now. I wasn't in the mood to unpack yet, so I walked down and could smell coffee and a tantalizing smell of pastries being made. Smells amazing, I complimented when reaching the bottom of the staircase, which gave me a view of the kitchen where Mrs. Flowers was looking into the oven and behind her was the small dining table. She turned around from my voice and I found that she was holding 2 trays, one with 6 muffins and one with 4 croissants. I always bake in the mornings. She stood up and I rushed to help her with the trays. It burnt my skin, which was why I set it down in a hurry. Mrs. Flowers added quietly, "It's peaceful," as she stared out the window. I am guessing she was referring to the baking. Don't mind me, she shrugged off her sadness. Grab some coffee, she offered, taking a seat at the table. Searching the room, I found 2 pots of coffee. Reaching over for one, I was stopped by her as she told me, "You don't want that one, dear." Her unexpected words stopped me. It's laced with vervain. We will continue in next part.